get started and we'll, I guess we'll start with Ms. Lowry. Well, let's just pull her up here and see what we can do this evening.
Good evening, council. So we are at our study session going over our budget. So we're going to start off with some follow-up items
Get
from.
started and we'll, I guess we'll start with Ms. Lowry. Somebody, let's just. That's you. Up here and see if you can watch. That's what's
So we are at our study session going over our budget. To start off with a follow-up.
I know you'll never hear it, so you should at least hear it once in your lifetime.
You can have a point there. He's proud of that one, isn't he?
We should probably wait just a moment as they get started. Oh,
I do that, but I want. Hello, hello, hello.
What was the movie where it came up? Raymond. Yeah. And then
Well,
there we go. Saturday we watched Simple Woman. That one.
yeah.
Sense
It's
Phil's
good.
made all week.
Okay, are we there? Okay, we're back. Sorry for those who had to endure that. Let's roll.
Okay, so the summary of the changes made by council is that we added the overhire position to police. We cut the code enforcement position to half-time. And then we approved the public works operations manager. We denied the parks recreation specialist, and then we added $730,000 to street preservation. So we just wanted to confirm that these changes are what council would like to see, or if further discussion would like to happen.
Ms. Erdman, can we just start with the first one there and kind of hit the highlights of that?
Yes, so after we added the overhire chief and all the PD staff kind of took a look at this a little bit longer. And I just wanted to bring a few things to council's attention. If we do go down that body worn camera path, which I think we'll talk about on the next slide. Back in July, when I originally talked to Lieutenant Purdue regarding staffing needs for doing that, it was, we thought we had about a half-time FTE to do that. We didn't take into consideration now moving forward into October, we're adding 4 new officers within the next month. And so that's going to eat up that capacity that we have within the admin personnel to cover any other additional records. So if we were to add an extra overhire and a body worn camera program, then we would definitely be short in the administration side of things. So from a staffing standpoint, I think just overall, it makes more sense to add an admin body to get them up to speed and caught up to the 4 additional officers that are coming on board. And then maybe rolling into 25, look at an overhire at that point. So I just want to make sure you guys have that information that we will be running low on the administrative side, especially if we go down the body worn camera path.
So, so the city's kind of asking us to kind of back that off for now.
I mean,
Mostly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, looking at the overall needs of the department. I think if we are going to add a body, it makes more sense to do it in the admin side this year rather than the officer side. So, but we never want to, turn down an officer. So
I understand that. Does anyone have any heartburn with removing that from the discussion?
We're only removing that though. We're not adding the admin, right?
that's
I think
for your
that's
guys'
coming.
discussion.
Yeah, that's coming
Yeah,
up.
we didn't have a request. We are just stating that if we're going to add a body in the PD, it makes more sense at this time to do it on the admin side rather than the officer side.
Because I'd like to see I'm fine with the overhire position. The reason I want the overhire position is I don't think we're gonna have enough police officers come this time next year. And, but I'm fine with that if they think they can do what they need to do with what they have. But I don't want to hire a position that we don't need yet. And by yet, I mean that, because you can say the same thing about this. the overhire. But yet, I mean, we don't know that we're gonna need somebody more than we have down there right now. When, I forget what I was looking at today. If it was a report that you guys sent or what, that was detailing where we were at 2019, where we're at now, and with call volumes and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't seem to be much different. And so what would be the reason that we would need it? Would it only be the cameras that we need the half person?
No, I think by adding the 4 additional officers, because we haven't been up to staff, that's going to increase about 16.5% the records that are coming in. So that's going to eat up whatever capacity we have, and then we're going to start to need additional admin on top of that. And Chief, you can go ahead.
So, I mean, just if I could wait in a second, but I asked Katrina to do a pretty good workload analysis of what we have now. It looks like they're way overworked now, and without any body cameras. And I think that Aaron sent out something to you, but essentially, with 2 people working in the front office, they should be working about 240 hours a month, productive hours. And currently they're working about 320. Once we add those 4 extra bodies, now they're at 358 hours work that they're going to be required to work. When we should only be expecting 240 hours. In other words, they're already beyond their max. And if we ask them to do more, they're going to be beyond that. And so the ask, and I appreciate where you're going, Mr. Bowman, is that why add the bodies for the cameras? It's not really for the cameras. We get to the cameras, we have to reevaluate that, whether they have the capacity to do all that. If we add this extra bodies, so regarding adding the extra officers, the 4 officers that we have, and they're coming, they're here. We have, there's 3 in various, 1, 2, 3, 4 in various stages of training right now. That's the 4 that we need. Once they come on board working solo, that's 4 extra people that are generating traffic tickets and reports and PDRs and all that. So that's the analysis we looked at.
So are they working overtime right now?
No, they're just working at beyond 100% of their, so we're expecting a lot out of them and they're meeting that.
Okay.
So we're just overworking.
Because I'm not trying to be mean here by any means, but if they're not working overtime, who sets the standard of what they are working that they're over exceeding that standard?
So that for the actual meat of that, I can bring Katrina in to explain all that, but she's done an analysis of what it should take to process a PDR request.
Okay.
Or what the hours should take to send something to the court or whatever. She's done that whole analysis. There's a whole bunch of data to support it.
Okay.
She just couldn't make it today, but she's on a little bit of, I didn't give her really enough notice for that, but I could certainly bring her in to give you that.
So
I trust that she did. I mean, I asked her to do an in-depth analysis, and I trust that she did.
Can I just interject?
Hold on, one more. The only reason I ask that is because if you go to a mechanic, the mechanic has a book that says it takes an hour and a half to do an alternator on a Ford. Okay. And that mechanic can do that alternator in 30 minutes, but that book says it takes an hour and a half. So he gets the bill for an hour and a half. Right now, if it takes him 3 hours, he doesn't get a bill for 3 hours. He can go 10% over, I think is what it is, without letting you know. Right. So, is it similar? Are we saying, well, this is what it should take, but we've got really good people that we've hired that have experience, and so they can crank them out a lot faster. But then we go back and we say, but it really should take 4 hours to do this one thing that she did in 2 hours because she's done so many of these. She's really good at them. We've got the systems, whatever it is, in place.
That's a great analysis, and I don't know the answer. I don't know if she calculated how long it should take them, like the mechanics book, or what it actually takes.
Okay.
I'm not positive of that.
I guess where I'm at on this, my understanding is after COVID and with the different situations that we are as far as Blake and arrests, that we're having less complicated arrests. And is it perhaps that maybe the formula we used to determine how many administrators we need is maybe not quite right, and maybe we should just hold off and see what that department looks like. Just take an overhire completely off, no admin, nobody on the streets, and if he needs to come back, bring an omnibus back in the middle of next year would be my.
Well, they will rise to the occasion. If we dump a ton more work, which we expect to, they will do it.
But
The
I mean,
question is, how do you measure whether they're
Well, and I know we had something come out, you had a plan for what policing looks like, and I think it said something like. The one number that jumps out is half a Dewey per officer per month, right? And I'm not sure that is that, it's a number that I remember seeing and something got sent out. So. If we hit that. Next year, I don't think we're at that this year. At that pace, so goals are great and I appreciate you setting goals. Then I would be interested in then helping that admin, because then obviously if we uptick what we're sending them, then they're gonna need help.
Okey doke.
I think
That's
what
where
you're
I'm at.
looking, yeah, I think what you're looking at the half a DUI per officer was from Katrina's analysis. That's on average what one officer generates per month.
Is that what we've been generating?
I
Yeah.
think that's based off of our average monthly work per officer currently.
Is that per patrol officer or is that per officer in the department? So we're taking, if we're at 28, we're taking, 28.
She did an average monthly workload generated per officer.
So
I'm not
So we don't know if that
I don't
includes,
know if that's.
No,
Chief.
I'm sure it doesn't include lieutenants and me. If anything, it may include detectives or something, which would be
because
skewed the wrong way. In this,
Yeah.
The working people, is that's, she did the working people?
working people, yes, sir.
I just don't think.
Thanks. You're right. But again,
That would-
kind of the meat of this, she can have the analysis of how many officers. The total activity is divided by each, whatever that number is. I just didn't
Well,
bring that niche, that.
I think that comes out in the quarterly report, doesn't it? Isn't the quarterly report hold that information?
The monthly report holds what each, well, it does the month statistics. It doesn't necessarily tell you how many officers were on that month or working full time.
it's not on 28. There's no way it is,
No, it's not what.
because we would have 158 DUIs and we had probably 50 to 60 last year. So it's based upon probably patrol is what that would be based upon. I would think. Probably not even detectives.
Okay, so
Nonetheless.
moving on down. Anything else till we get to the police equipment? Anything that needs to be spoken about?
I'm looking at you. Just if you wanted to have more discussion or if there's more questions regarding the halftime code or the Parks and Rec specialist. I know there was a few questions that came out of biweekly, so I didn't know if there was.
Does anyone
anything else.
have any questions about any of those other four that are under that summary? Don't think so. We'll move on.
Okay, so I will remove the overhire FTE and not add anything else. It'll go away. So then the police equipment uniform detail line item of that $56,000 that was brought up at the last study session of this does include equipment. The naming of it said uniforms. I know that may have been a little bit of the question. So $12,000 of this is the annual ballistic vests. Typically, that's what we've been replacing based upon the expiration of those, and of that, the grant that we get from the federal government pays for half of those every year. And then the remaining is for uniform replacements as needed, as approved by the supervisor, as well as any other equipment line items that they may need. Historically, we've spent about 26 to 36,000 since 2020 on this line item. So we could reduce it down to 35,000 if that's what council would like to do.
So we spend 26 to 36 usually, and 6,000 of that's going to come from the federal government, right?
Correct, which we have to appropriate the full amount in order to show the
get-
out, yes.
And what do we do with the ballistic vests that are no longer being used? Do we surplus those?
Destroy them, I think, that's where I know.
Do we have to destroy those?
Guessing there's a liability.
I don't know, I don't think we would take on.
Well,
I don't
not
think we
to-
take on that liability to give them away.
The military's done it before, but I don't know if they still do, where it's just surplus. I mean, if you want to put a ballistic vest on that may or may not be good, that's,
Yeah.
you paid $20 for it. What do you expect, right?
Buyer beware.
Yeah.
You could sue for any reason.
Oh, I know. But, okay. I would like to see it go down to I don't know.
It's not worth the risk of $20.
No, not, I think he's off of
No,
that now.
the 26 to 36, I think right in the middle, 30.
We can do that. Okay, so then moving on to the other final follow-up item. So the tasers. Some information was provided to council in an email as far as what the difference is between the tasers of law enforcement versus civilian, as well as the staff went back and looked and was able to reduce the quote, getting less cartridges to reduce it down to $87,000. The contract does include software which records the use of the tasers, which are used based upon assigned serial numbers as part of the investigations. And then when the tasers are deployed, it tracks when they're used. And then you cannot buy separately from the tasers the warranty, and it also provides firmware updates. And then the warranty is required by Axon and can't be excluded from the contract. So more discussion about the tasers,
So you dropped the cost 50 grand.
about 43,000, yes.
So we can't go outside of Axon.
You cannot,
Right.
that if you, there's certain pieces that Axon will not sell, the evidence.com license, they will not sell separately. So if you go through a third party vendor, they won't sell that as a separate item. You have to go through them to bundle it together. And we need that to get the updates for the firmware and to be able to track how, when they're deployed.
That's convenient.
Yeah.
So chief, how many times have we deployed taser in the last year? In the last 5 years, we've had these for 5 years. How many taser deployments have we had?
I don't know for sure, 5 or 6 at most.
So 5 or 6 at most. So we're gonna spend $30,000 on warranties and firmware updates for 5 or 6 deployments.
Right.
I still think we go through a second party vendor and just get the tasers and get because if you're gonna do body worn cameras, which is the next step, that body worn camera is gonna tell you who used the taser. And you'll be able to see how many times they lit that person up. You'll just watch the person. They'll let you know. And so I don't know that we need all the software. I don't know that we need it's crazy the amount of, like, I would love to have this racket that we're the only ones that supply it. I mean, the government worries about Microsoft and Google and everybody else. What about these guys that sell to the government and only you can buy from them? And then you have to buy their software and you have to buy their warranties and it's ridiculous. So, I would go through, I think we go through a third party vendor then. There's a way to do it because a third party vendor does it without buying warranties.
I think what they're selling is not actually, it says professional grade, but they're a different model. So they're not actually used for law enforcement from the way we understand it.
So the one I found had both.
Yeah, it says the Taser 7 and the third party vendor sells the Taser 7 CQ.
This one did not. It had the CQ and it had the law enforcement model. You had to be law enforcement and provide your credentials to be able to buy the law enforcement model.
Was that the one? There's one of them we looked at, I think that you suggested, or somebody did, is you can only buy 6 of them or something for them. You couldn't buy a bulk like for a whole department. But I don't know if it was that one or different.
I don't know. I just,
The one I
I
found, you
just
only
think,
had 9 available.
like, I still think we should buy 10 to 15 of them personally. And you just rotate tasers. You go down, they're in a room, you pick up your taser, put it and go to work for the day. Come back, put your taser in the docking station, night shift comes in, we buy some extra batteries, you cut your taser bill in half. We don't use them. We could buy the 40 millimeter cannons that we bought for the cars for every one of our employees down there and make them carry that for a third the price of these tasers. And say, there's your less lethal. And you're carrying an actual freaking cannon.
A grenade launcher.
It's crazy that we're paying this kind of money for something we don't use. And do we have, these ones were leased, right? The ones we have right now?
We paid them out over time, and not technically at least, but we paid them out over time.
Rent tone.
That's how they offer me to over 5 years paying them out or not.
So we don't have to send the ones back that we have.
They just don't update them anymore.
But what's
We can yard sell those off.
well, you could. What's the update they need? The update that Axon's telling me we need, or the update that we need?
I wouldn't know what.
I would
That's
imagine
what they roll out.
it's the software update, because
Yeah.
the actual weapon itself they're not going to touch. It's a software update is what you're paying for. Same thing that you do with John Deere. John Deere won't let you touch their tractors without their,
To work on them,
yeah.
but the tractor doesn't. The tractor works, right? And so that taser there has no software that it needs to work. Is that correct?
to
If you
operate.
pull the trigger, that taser will work.
I don't think so, but the updates come with the. Actually, I don't know what the updates do. The electronic updates do something to it to make it function appropriately. What they're telling me is without updates, eventually it won't function appropriately. Or I asked a specific question to the rep myself, can we just keep the ones we have?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. And I said, well, they work. He said, probably. But probably not. And if they don't work and we needed them in a less lethal situation, we're opposed.
That's a
Yeah,
bummer.
yeah.
But I thought about it. Just keep the ones we have. We don't use them. They're working fine. But the reality is if we needed them,
I mean, but here, my concern is I get saving the dollars, but if you do need it and we haven't updated and we haven't bought the licensed ones and there's a problem, that's going to be a really, really expensive savings. So that's my concern. I have no problem trying, finding licensed ones online that are cheaper or however we can do it. But if we start getting too deep and saving $20,000 on a $50 million, I mean, it scares me because it just seems like they do have a monopoly, and I agree with Councilmember Bowman that it seems shady, but I mean, that concerns me, the risk.
Anything else?
I'd like to know what the software does. I'd like to know if it's just a tracking software.
Well, it sounds like it makes them ineffectual in 5 years.
Well, then that should be, I mean,
That's
that should be a lawsuit,
just a push of the button and boom.
Yeah,
and who,
Apple software.
Well, I do agree with Councilmember McCoy on that we may be saving dimes compared to what dollars we'll be pushing out.
Yeah, I mean, just how litigious people are with this stuff. It concerns me.
So we'll ask, does anyone want to nix this, the taser deal?
I don't like it.
There's one. Anyone else?
I don't like it, but I haven't heard
A reasonable alternative.
yeah.
I'm
So-
Councilmember McCoy.
So let's move forward.
So then for body worn cameras,
And I assume you practice occasionally on each other or?
yes, sir. We welcome the
Ma-
council members to
Well,
participate.
We can sell tickets to that.
May I ask that you use the old ones first?
We do not practice on each other. I hope you knew that was in jest, but
No, what you haven't
shot each other? No,
really?
not in years. That was a big rage when the tasers first came out. So you could step up and. take
Okay,
the
well,
taser, but
okay.
Nobody's doing that.
We're not getting rid of our old ones, right?
Don't know yet. There's no plan to. But they can't just sit in a box either unused forever. So I'm not sure if we're gonna destroy them. That's what I would assume we do.
Yes, ma'am, I see you. Okey doke, body worn
Yeah,
cameras.
we can find some.
What's the deal with body worn cameras? What's the city wanting an answer on?
I think it's just a policy decision. Do we want to go down that path? We have not approached this in the negotiation side of things at this time. We were kind of waiting to see what council wanted to do, if it's the right time to move forward with them or not. So I will turn it over to you.
Other than the small cities, we are the only city of any size in the county that doesn't have them. Washougal has them, Camas has them, Vancouver has them, Sheriff has them. And so, is there any interest in moving this forward, starting in 24?
How much will the sales tax cover this cost? The public safety sales tax?
375 is what we've been getting, isn't it, roughly? And it'll cover the whole thing, buying them. And then have you asked the IT boys what this is to,
So.
we have to buy that from Axion, right?
No, we can buy them from anybody
Well, but the idea is they're connected to the tasers.
that
They-
never get used.
Well,
So we're connecting them to a taser that gets used.
that have it.
You're getting the cloud-based software, so it's holding the data in the cloud system. And then the software allows you to pull that out for public records requests. That's what you're getting.
But
with
you
the
can pull the
software.
same, like, you can pull the same thing out of someone else's camera.
Well,
You just
I-
don't need it tied to, we don't have them tied to our guns. We don't have them tied to,
I understand, but are we gonna walk with one platform or are we gonna mix and match?
depends. Is the platform 3 times more than another platform?
Is there another? platform?
Yes, ma'am, I see you.
Oh, yeah. There's different cameras out there than the Axon.
I think we looked at the, and Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because the rest of the jurisdictions are on this platform, and there has been talk if we could share resources regionally, potentially for the PDR requests and so forth, then we're all on the same platform.
Is there a number other than the 375 will cover it?
253,000 is what,
$250,000.
The outlay. What's our annual reoccurring for something like this? Software every 5 years, I'm hearing.
correct. And I believe that's what they say the expiration or useful life on the camera is the 5 years. So it'd be the same as the tasers.
They hired a bunch of Apple and Nexus.
And we're paying for warranties on all those, just like we're doing the taser.
Probably want the warranties on those. 200, $250,000. And then the following year, it's just a matter of a person, if we needed one, to generate whatever's requested.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say I'm all for the tasers, but at this point in time, I am personally a no on the cameras.
Okey doke. Anyone else? She said she was fine. Did I see that?
She said she was in favor of the
Interested
camera.
in the cameras.
Yes, I thought I saw it.
So what is this? I mean, it's gonna cost us $256,000. What's it gonna cost us the next year and the next year and the next year? Cause that's, I mean, this is, if you're saying it's gonna add a person, we're gonna have, a portion of this is gonna have to be bargained. So we're gonna have costs there. We're gonna add a person to this. This is the legal department all over again. 2.0 right here. We just need an attorney, then we need a paralegal, then we need a paralegal and paralegal and an attorney. And so what is it gonna be in year 2? Because if we buy these now, you gotta add a person when you add in a person. January, right? So, and that person's not in here. So it goes from 256 to 400 real quick.
Which will be covered by the sales tax, which is why the sales tax was voted in. So it becomes somewhat neutral in that sense. It's money that is collected out of the citizenry on a voted issue.
Or, I mean, we can use those funds just for an extra officer, which is what we've been doing. So
Or
it's
anything else. It's not dedicated toward that, but I'm just stating.
personally, I prefer an extra officer. Which is what we're doing.
Okay, well, let's don't linger. Dan, what do you think?
Not at this time.
Okey doke, Mr. McCoy,
Not this year.
okey doke. Fails. Moving on.
So moving on to the other departments, unless there's any other carryover items that I did not touch on from last meeting. Okay. So for legislative department, everything is relatively similar to the previous year. We did incorporate what the salary commission has given as an increase to the council, as well as that is actually it as far as increases go. So are there any questions on the legislative department?
Why the huge, why, did we spend $15,000 this year?
No, that's just the budget. That's
On
the
training and
budget for
travel?
Training and travel, that included the DC trip and then the conferences and so forth, but that's not, you can see historically, we have not spent that.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to say that. I saw that historically and I'm like, we haven't gone anywhere. Spokane doesn't cost that much.
Yeah, no, that includes the DC trip, the mayor's exchange, AWC regional meetings, annual conference, and then action days.
Okey doke. Any questions on this? Seeing none.
Moving on to the judicial department. So again, these costs are split with Ridgefield and La Center. So we will recoup these costs back from those jurisdictions. Overall, there's not a lot of change. We do budget worst case scenario for the public defender as well as jail. We had a really high year in public defender costs back pre-COVID. And so that's why that's up at 200,000. But as you can see, we don't typically, that doesn't go out. And then jail has typically come in under 100,000 as well, but it kind of just depends on the crimes that are going on within the city. So are there any questions about the judicial department?
So on the pro tem judges, we have the judge currently at the top, I assume, along with the three ladies in the office. This does not include the prosecutor.
So the judge, correct, this doesn't include the prosecutor. The judge is his own line item down because he's a contract employee, so he
So,
doesn't.
okay, so that's
he's
all
not-
in one. I'm taking
Right.
that, okay. I misunderstood that. I thought that was his replacement while he was on vacation that we were spending $64,000 on.
No.
Okay. And that's the security folks as well?
Correct.
Okay,
Everything to do with court except for the prosecutor, it has to come out of a different department just to keep those segregated.
any questions on that? Hearing none.
Okay. Moving on to the executive department. So for this, you can see there is the large increase to insurance. That's the largest increase for this department. For the election, we did take out the TBD vote for 24 because we anticipate it going out in 25. But other than that, everything is relatively similar to the prior year. Are there any questions about the executive department?
What is our vehicle maintenance?
Vehicle R&R, that, so it comes out of the executive department, but it's for the entire general fund, except for police is separate, but this is for all the other department vehicles.
And again, the insurance, that's for the city as a whole? No.
Nope, it is not for the city as a whole. It's for the general funds portion of the city bill. So our overall of what we send to WCIA is quite a bit higher than that. I can give
Exactly.
you.
And why is that held in the executive then? Why is that held with the executive?
So the executive is for the general fund. So it's a one line item for the
Okay.
general fund.
Okay.
Was the election higher because we had a primary where nobody showed up?
So the election is actually, that's for anticipated, we have to pay a voter maintenance fee and that voter maintenance fee continues to increase every year. It was about $17,000 last year. We won't know until we get the bill from the county this year, what that voter maintenance fee is. And then we also have, when there's elected official on the council. So this year we have the 3 and then next year we'll have the 4. So that's what those election
We'll have
costs are.
6 this year, yeah, because we have primary and general. Is it just,
Yeah.
you pay extra for the primary, correct?
Correct, because they take the total cost of what it takes them for the election and they split it amongst everybody who's a part of the election. So those costs, again, that's not an easy thing to anticipate how much it's going to cost because it depends on what is on the ballot.
Mhm.
So
Any questions on the executive? Hearing none.
Moving on to HR, we do have a continuation with professional services. It includes our labor attorney with anticipated negotiations.
Okay, there is a question then.
Yes,
On the executive, who's covered under that?
the executive, that would be everybody at the east end of the hallway. So that would be Aaron, Rob.
Including the HR person.
Nope, the HR is a separate department. So she's a department of 1.25 with portion of the executive assistant.
So she doesn't fall under the executive.
No.
Okay,
How many are in the executive then?
Me, Rob, Alicia, Amanda. And Martha, she's her salary. So 5 out of
5 in the executive and 1 on her own.
But
Okay.
so in the HR department, as I was saying, the professional services does include the labor attorney for negotiations. And then other than that, it's pretty much the same as prior years. Are there questions about the HR department?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And moving on to the finance department. We don't have any additional requests for this year's budget. It's status quo for us. We did increase the senior assistance program because it is housed within our department, and with the pass-through grant, the COPS technology grant, that will come in here for whatever we determine is going to be that carryover for that $413,000. So 300,000 of it is going to the school district. Since it's a pass-through, we will house that in our department.
And we hold on to 100?
Yep, 113 is ours, and then 300 will get passed through to them. So are there any questions about the finance department? Okay. So looking at information services, we try to house all of our software needs within one department to make it easier across all of our different departments. So you do see a little bit of an increase on our IT maintenance contracts just because things continue to be more expensive with subscription-based services. In particular, I think I talked last year about Microsoft and how expensive it has become now that they're subscription-based. If I can say the word subscription-based, the tongue twister tonight. So are there any questions about the IT department?
So each department's paying for their own phone, their own cell service, all of that.
Correct. The cell service is all paid individually because we're able to directly charge that to a person in a department. Yes,
Pay $11,000 for phone leases for IT.
21.
nope.
21, what is it now?
The phone lease, so that was back when we no longer have that. We have a GoToConnect platform that is
Landline?
wireless.
Oh.
It's based on wireless services and it's part of that network and it's significantly cheaper. This was with, I believe it was Cisco Connect, where it was the Polycom system.
Yeah.
And so it paid for all of our infrastructure, all of our phones, and it was over a period of time. And then that paid off. We continued to use that same equipment with our new GoToConnect. So we were able to save significant amount of money doing that. So that's what that was back in.
Where does that fall now?
That falls in each individual department. So we split that cost, the GoToConnect again, based upon
Okay.
where each desk phone is and or mobile device. It's actually, we're able to get the GoToConnect not only with the actual landline, but over the computer as well as connecting it to our phone. So we always have a connectability to our desk phone, which has been fantastic. Okay. So looking at the legal department, there's been some changes with that over the last couple of years. So we were able to actually reduce what we anticipate our needs for legal services, contracted legal services down to 120,000 from 176,000 this year, just based upon what we've been using this year. And then we do have our contract prosecutor in this department as well.
When does the professional services contract come up?
For the prosecutor.
Nope, for our lawyer.
We did it on a year-to-year basis. I think it's just ongoing, so, I have to look at that. I'm not 100% sure. I think it just automatically renews, but I'll double check.
And with the prosecutor, that's everything she does. That's,
That's the prosecutor and her paralegal.
and then who pays for any of the outside stuff that they may need? Where does that come from?
She does. So if she has a conflict prosecutor that comes in, she pays them directly. We just pay her.
If they need an investigator or something like that. If she needs to have an investigator on something, who knows if she does? Obviously, she hadn't come up with one yet, or
No.
that she's writing out of her budget. Okay, just wondering.
What is the training and travel associated with those, since they're all contract?
Well, there won't be any next year.
No, I want to know what we did, why we had it this year, the 2550.
We may have just had that.
That was there as a placeholder in case the new contract prosecutor needed training, and I don't believe we have spent, and actually I know we haven't spent anything out of that this year and don't anticipate to do so, which is why it is 0 this year for next year.
Thank you.
If we want, we can move on and while she's
Please.
looking for that.
Yep.
So are there any other questions about legal other than the one outstanding question?
Here or none?
So for the engineering department, we don't, again, we had a reduction in the professional services. But other than that, everything is the same as it has been or anticipated to be, to stay within. So are there any questions about the engineering department?
It's like training and travel's almost doubled.
Mhm.
Why is that?
We have a couple new employees, so just increased it. And we've been trying to keep it low, so we've been not attending stuff, but
Okay,
yeah, so just trying to catch up.
thank you.
How much of our, and maybe this is a question for you, Aaron, how much of our training, because when I hear training and travel, I think, we're paying for motels, we're paying for cars, we're paying for flights, we're paying any of that kind of stuff for them to go somewhere. How much of it can be done online now?
The majority of it does get done online now. We've saved quite a bit of money, especially since COVID, because they seem to all offer a online option. So I can definitely say travel outside of the state or even inside the state has been a lot less in the last few years. And just to follow back up, our contract with Mackey Jackson is it's ongoing unless one party decides to give notice that they would like to terminate that.
Okay,
And then as note for the professional service line item in engineering, that is reimbursable. So we have a budget line item in both revenues, and then here is an expense. If we're needing to do a third party, we then charge the developer for that engineering review. So 150,000 of that 155 is that. Are there any other questions about engineering?
no, ma'am.
Okay. So looking at facilities. So for the facility maintenance line item, those are some of the things we talked about at the very beginning, which include the carryover of the city hall carpet and paint. And then the senior center remodel for 250,000. And then the rest is just general, the normal facility maintenance like janitorial and lights, Northwest Natural Utilities, et cetera. Are there any questions about the facilities department, or do you want to talk about those two projects again?
Well, the painting and carpet comes up later.
So.
Okay. So moving on to civil service. This is just a recruitment for our law enforcement folks. So we anticipate it being relatively similar to 2023. Are there any questions about civil service?
No, ma'am.
Building and development, this is strictly the building inspectors. And then this is where we did add the Well, actually, that was not on my first slide. The building inspector, so we want to talk about that as well. Officially, are we okay adding the building inspector? Official. Building official, I said inspector, didn't I?
Just for those watching, that would be where Mr. Drone is our halftime guy with the fire service. Will be leaving us once this position is filled. And then we'll still be responsible for all of the fire marshal duties and whatever else was contractually agreed to by the fire service. So, okay, I see you, Ms. DeRosiers. And then are there any other questions? If not, we'll saying yes to this tonight. Will that mean that we'll see an advertisement for this sometime in the near future?
Yes, if everyone is in agreement, we can start that process. I know we talked about at the last meeting, the ops manager, we've already started drafting those job descriptions and getting that moving forward. So we will do the same with the building official.
Does anyone have any problem with authorizing them to go ahead and start the search for a building official?
Is that already in this?
Yes. That is included in this. I just forgot to talk about it in the first, I apologize.
I don't hear anyone voicing a no, so we'll assume we'll roll with this person, whomever it may be.
And then this also has within the professional service line item, the same sort of line item that the engineering has the pass-through cost. So if we need to contract with a third party, then we charge the developer back for what those costs are based on the invoice that we get.
And those that might be looking, the school impact fees and fire impact fees are just pass-throughs.
Correct,
You have to notice them, but they zero out.
correct. We have to budget for them and then they're just a pass-through collect, and then they go out and then we collect a small admin fee.
On our memberships and subscriptions, what is that like Microsoft, that kind of stuff? Trade groups?
That
Trade groups,
is-
or what is that? Because we went from 185 and 20 to 852, no, we're 185 to 26 or 6,400.
Yep, so that is the SWWA-ICC, which Sam can probably explain what that acronym means.
Actually, I don't think I can. I think it's International Code Council.
Yeah,
Every approximately 2 years, the building codes are updated and then those account for the online subscriptions, and we usually need a hard copy in-house,
so this is like your NFPA stuff, ICC stuff.
all that stuff. But it seems to rotate every couple of years. So 1 year it won't be as much, and then 1 year it'll double.
So you're just buying the books.
Yes.
Or the portal where.
It's the
you can go on.
encyclopedia.
Yeah,
Right.
look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyone else? Moving on.
so looking at the transfers of what's coming out of the general fund to other departments, we have the transfers to capital projects, which that included what we talked about last time. Several sessions ago, the 700,000 for 20th, and then give me 1 second. The Parkway main signal improvement, Southeast Clark signal upgrades, and then Southwest 20th Avenue, Northwest 9th. So those are some matches to some grants. And then we have the transfer to the left one reserve. That's something we do every year. And then the transfer to
You speak of them. Do you know how many are left?
3.
There are 3 of them.
And then the transfer to the Parks Fund. And then we have the transfer to the Street Fund that includes that additional 730,000. And then the transfer to the Water Fund, those are the ARPA dollars that are going towards those capital projects.
And all of those are going to start in 24, Mark? You're going to spend $5 million in 24? On.
That is the
on
goal.
these?
That'd be the reservoir and then the wells.
And when will those contracts be let?
Well 6 is ready, so that'll be at the beginning of the year. The reservoir is actually in the county, so we're going through their process for like site plan approval. So that will probably be late first quarter to early second quarter for that one.
Oh, it physically sits in the county.
Yes,
Does it touch the city at any point so that we could just annex it in
it's not in our urban growth boundary.
on top of the hill?
Yeah,
How'd we miss that?
it doesn't go that way. We didn't want the hill.
It's something we're gonna look at with the new.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Our parks land out there sits way outside our urban growth boundary.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah, we've got the like DNR where the reservoir is, and then even farther out to the Durkee property.
Yeah, but our water sits in the county, so it's through their planning commission and all of that to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar process that we have. It just goes through a staff review, but yeah, it goes through their process.
Are they better with us as a city than they
No.
are with Mr. Johnson as?
As a customer.
I'm not gonna comment.
Well, I can state for Mr. Johnson, they're terrible to work with. So I wish you the best of luck.
Where are we at on the wells for the iron bacteria? Is that something that's going to possibly happen? Is that technology going to allow us to go forward or?
At this point, we're not working on that. So the one we're working on is well 6, which produces pretty well, but has that. It hasn't affected the underneath the ground piece that's been as the waters come out. So we're going to add the filter system, which will address that. What you're talking about is like 7 and 8 that is actually affected in the ground. We haven't addressed that yet. We're doing some of this other projects, and that will kind of come down the road as we get there.
But the technology is still there. It's more engineering capacity than technology at this point.
I think the technology is still being tested. There's a couple methods that I've heard about that I think they're still working on. So I don't think it's, in my opinion, not perfected yet. So I think, I'd wait to kind of have other people do it and then find out what the best one is.
And since we're speaking of water, every gallon we drink, how much is our water and how much is bought water?
So we can get up to 2,000 from CPU. Our wells amongst the various are probably about 1,000 off the top of my head. So at like the summer
two-thirds is-
peak where we're actually pulling, it's probably 2/3, 1/3, but that's, a few days out of the year. We don't typically pull the full 2,000.
Otherwise, we're half and half.
Yeah, I'd say.
Any other questions on the transfers? Yes, ma'am. Hearing none.
Okay, so looking at the Parks Recreation and Rentals, so we took out the Parks and Rec specialist. We did have to increase our part-time line item just because with all the rentals that we have, we need staff to be there, so we had to increase that. And then, other than that, this does also have the insurance and the indirect costing for the Parks Fund as a whole. That does include the parks maintenance. It's kind of like the executive department where it just goes here. Are there any questions about the Parks and Rec department?
Will we get a report? I know we've looked at this in the past, but can we at some time get a report on how many of our rentals are being at a reduced rate? So either senior center or senior rates or nonprofit rates or.
Between nonprofit versus the
Yeah.
regular.
Yeah, because I know in the past, it's been pretty much a nonprofit center. And it'd be nice to see what that looks like now.
Are there any other questions about the Parks and Rec department?
Seeing none.
Okay. So moving on to our fee schedule. So a draft copy was sent to council on Friday. We did use 3.5% as a CPI to increase building fees as well as the SDCs and our other development fees. The park rental fees increased in some places to some market rates. And then we did have our utility rate increases that we talked about previously. Were there any questions about the fee schedule? This will come before council in November for a public hearing and then the second meeting in November for adoption.
This is the only change to the fee schedule?
Correct. It's a mass change. So when we do the CPI, it goes against,
On the whole line.
correct.
Okay, so at 3.5, we'll just go
Yeah.
down the, go down the
Every
line.
single fee that we have goes up by the
Right.
CPI.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Hearing none.
And then moving on to the lodging tax fund. So this is the approvals that have thus far come out of the lodging tax fund. There was Harvest Days. They requested 65,000. The committee approved 45,000. Southwest Washington Winery Association is going to hold a Save War event. It was previously held in Vancouver. They're bringing it to the Battleground Community Center. So they requested 5,000 for advertising and it was approved. Best Western had 3 separate approvals. One was for online advertising with Milestone. They requested 24,000 and it was approved for 14,000. The highway sign, they requested 1,500 and it was approved. Online advertising with Plan B Consulting, 31,400 was requested and $24,000 was approved. We do have a meeting on Monday to go over 2 additional applications that the committee wanted further information about, including the Ladybug Bazaar, 6,750 was requested. So they requested not only advertising, but also some actual event expenses. And then Best Western Coin TV campaign, they requested 24,000, but the committee wanted some more information about what it was reaching.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I'm confused by where a lot of these outlays are and how I interpret the intent of the lodging tax fund. Is not the intent of this fund to bring activities, to bring people into the city? As far as the Best Western, it seems like we're just taking tax dollars and giving it to their advertising department, which just gets them more capacity, which I'm hearing they're fairly at capacity anyway, but even if they weren't, I don't see how this is a effective use of tourist dollars. I get the $1,500 sign. I get that. I mean, at least it's telling people we have a hotel. That makes sense, but 54,000 and then another. So we're looking at almost $75,000 that we're going to hand to the Best Western so they can advertise. Does that sound about right?
That is correct.
Is that the intent of this fund?
So the intent of this fund changed about a couple years ago to where the state legislature actually defined tourism to strictly heads and beds. And so it's been, prior to that, there was a dual purpose of it. It was not only heads and beds, but also you wanted people into the community, you wanted community events to get the sales tax and bringing people to town. And then they switched it to being strictly over 50 miles. The Best Western advertising, it's been historic that the committee has approved theirs and it has increased every year. In the last 2 years, it's increased significantly of what they've been requested and what was approved. It does comply with state law under tourism marketing. However, if the council would not like to fund as much and would like the intent to be what you're saying as far as getting events into town, you're able to do that. So what's going to happen is that these are going to come back to council in an official capacity separate from the budget at our next council meeting, to where you will go through and you can deny, increase, or modify any of the applications advised to you by the city council or by the advisory committee. At that point, that will go back to the advisory committee. They have 45 days to rebuttal. And then council can approve it officially with the budget adoption. So the timing will be just about 46 days from when we do all of this.
Can you explain to me? Sorry, go ahead.
Are we the final say?
You were the final say yes.
So
You're just an
so on
advisory
that 45
committee.
days, come make your case
Correct,
and we're swayed or we're not.
correct.
That was gonna be my question.
Oh, sorry.
The only thing the council cannot do is you can't bring in another,
We can't bring our own event in.
correct, you can't, or
Create.
one of the ones that they denied, you can't then approve. You can only modify or deny what they advised
Sorry,
to you.
sure.
Okay, so the committee's meeting on Monday.
Correct.
It'll be an up and down on the bottom 2. And then at that point, it comes to us on the 16th.
Yep.
We sort it out, whatever happens, happens. If they're unhappy with whatever happened, we'll see them in a month and a half and then we're on our way.
And
Correct.
does that come on consent agenda or is that gonna come as a
Yep, that
line?
comes separate.
Okay, perfect. I would be very interested in having that conversation.
Okey doke. Does anyone have any questions about how much is in there currently, by the way?
289,000.
And how much comes roughly every year?
It used to be about 55,000 the last couple of years. We had some upticks to almost 96,000, but that was some carryover from 2020. I'd say on average, you're more like $50,000 to $60,000 a year. Yes, there's more requests than there is money coming in
Yeah, there's,
by a lot.
again, as my dear old daddy used to say, there's too much month at the end of the money. At some point, it'll be gone. There'll be $55,000 every year, roughly. Okay, well, we'll look for that on the 16th and see what happens.
Keep spending $75,000 to get to.
So vehicle R&R, we do have the replacement of our 2 Vector trucks, the sewer and storm drainage. We do have some old values of the ones we currently have. We've been saving for these for quite a number of years in our R&R fund to be able to purchase them because we knew that they needed to be replaced. We do have the replacement of 6 vehicles for Public Works or replacement of 5 vehicles and the addition of 1 for the ops manager. And then the police department vehicles, we have budgeted for 4 patrol vehicles and 1 admin vehicle.
The street sweeper came from the Department of Ecology. The Vector truck, I look at the storm drainage truck, a 3,000, that obviously is crush value on a $3,000 truck. The Department of Ecology is not interested in Vector trucks.
We've actually tried twice for the storm Vector and we haven't gotten it both times.
And there's $960,000 there. And I assume, I know what the answer is. It's on the state contract. So there's not a competitive bid on putting that out to see. We just know that Olympia stated it's $550 and we're going to get the truck.
You can actually do it both ways. I mean, you can put out a bid and if you don't like it, then you can go with state bid. So there
What are
is
we
that
doing?
option.
What
We
are
haven't made that decision yet.
Have we looked at any used trucks because vac trucks are used by a lot of construction companies, big construction companies, that kind of stuff. Have we looked out there on the used market at all to see if there's anything?
No, I mean, at this point, we've looked since we keep them for so long and generally run them into the ground, we typically look for new just because we're going to use and abuse them until they don't work anymore.
Okey doke.
Well, and I will say too, that the cost of those vac trucks within the last 2 years doubled.
Yeah, well, seems to be the story of our life. Yeah, just a minute.
So
On the public works vehicles, those are 1500s and 2500s.
Yeah, actually, and this year, half of them will be the Rangers because they're for either like a supervisor or a inspector.
Okay, so 2 of them will be small vehicles and 3 will be larger vehicles.
Yeah, I think it's 3 and 3. 3 will be Rangers and then 3 will be
Oh, yeah.
one
they're 50s. I'm sorry, I thought there was 5. Okay, so half and half.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, sir.
On the police vehicles. So I brought this up in our meeting this week. 10 years ago, we switched to the Ford platform. A lot of reasons why we did. We had when we did this, we bought 3 different vehicles at the time. We bought the Ford Explorer, we bought the Ford Taurus, and we bought a Chevy Tahoe. And went through basically to try them out, see what we liked. We still own all 3 of those vehicles. And we settled on the Ford Explorer. And so I think there's a lot of there's only really 2 companies that are making these anymore, Ford and Dodge, unless we want to do with the Chevy Tahoe. Chevy Tahoe is about $10,000 more a piece. They're quite a bit bigger. The Fords, we will be able to get the Fords next year. I did some calling around and found out why they say there is no 2024s being built. It's because they're gonna be building 2025s and they will be released. We should be able to get them
November, I think is.
You know, so sometime we'll be able to order in November and probably receive them sometime early summer. And so, yeah, strike dependent and that kind of stuff. But I think we need to continue forward with the Ford vehicles. There is no other departments out here running the Dodges at all. Or at the least the Durangos. The only ones that are running the Dodges are running the Chargers, which I think Dodge has said is going away. I had the opportunity to read the state of Michigan's report from the State Patrol on all the vehicles that they tested, which included these ones that we're looking at. And there's quite a difference in performance and things that you would consider in looking at a police vehicle between the two from a safety standpoint. And so I think we need to move forward with the 5, but do it only if they're Fords.
Is the admin vehicle the same? It's just an Explorer without all the kit on it?
Yeah, so in the past, we've picked up Explorers instead of Interceptors. The Interceptor is actually the police model and the Explorer is the civilian model. So, and we've also, whatever we can find, it doesn't have to be an SUV. We could pick up a sedan for that as well. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it does not, it will not be rotated into the fleet to be used by the patrol.
that's correct.
Okay, just so that.
Have we ever thought about rotating them into the fleet? So because the admin vehicles don't get used as much, correct? And so have we thought about buying an admin vehicle? And instead of rotating through your patrol, rotate 2 admin vehicles into patrol. So run them as admin vehicles for a year or a year and a half, rotate them into patrol for a year and a half, and then, flip them. Have we thought about doing something like that?
We haven't thought of that. There's an upfit for the admin vehicles that are different, and so you'd have these internal lights and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have on the, marked patrol cars. I mean, we could probably do that, but I think what we're leaning toward is for admin vehicles to be something less than police performance vehicles.
Yeah.
So that's what we have now, are 2 civilian model Explorers, like Karen said, that makes one. We expect it didn't have to be, it could be a sedan of any, really.
Everyday vehicle.
So it can be significantly less money, I think,
Yeah.
than a police car that we could then use. But we just don't need that kind of performance for the admin.
And does that include your detectives?
That does not include detectives. The one we're talking about now is for the other.
But I mean, would you
So-
consider detectives the same? Do the detectives need a patrol rated vehicle
No.
as a
No,
detective?
But no, they don't. So that's, currently, we have 3 perfectly good detective vehicles. So that we're set for
Yeah.
that for a few years. They're marked up appropriately internally and all that. The next go around for recycling those, I don't know that they need to be performance related either.
I think I would like us to look at the Camus model and start, I say it's a Camus model. There's probably a lot of agencies that do this. We're an agency that's small enough that we could maximize the potential of running these for 3-4 years. Watch what our warranty is. I know the warranty difference between Ford and Dodge was quite a bit different too. Ford was 5-year, 100,000 mile drivetrain, 3-year bumper to bumper. Dodge was only 5-year, 60,000 mile drivetrain. But looking at flipping those before warranty expires, so everything that would be major would be covered under warranty. Flip our cars when we get the maximum dollar out of them, and look at doing something like that.
Which is the plan. That's what we've started with the public works vehicles, and we're actually this year going to be able to surplus some of the 16s that we had originally. So we'll start to see some value coming back out of that fleet. So they will be on a 5-year rotation, and our plan is to do the same with the police fleet.
Well, the suggestion is that we continue with the platform that we've used for 10 years on buying Fords. Does anyone have any heartache about just holding on with that? Should we see any need to switch? I don't think we do. So we'll somewhere along the line authorize you to buy 5 more vehicles from Henry Ford. Somewhere. When they come back to work.
So looking at our technology R&R fund, the same sort of idea as our vehicle R&R, where we pay overtime into this fund and then replace technology as necessary. We do have 15 MDTs for the police department up. Those are the computer systems within the vehicles themselves up for replacement this next year. And then we have 20 laptop replacements, 9 desktop replacements, and then the backup replacement server and server support, all planned within our R&R replacement, just to make sure we're under warranty and we're not having expensive repairs to all of our stuff, and we can move along our way.
The $113,000 that Uncle Sam's sending us, will it slide into, I don't, how much money's in this fund to pay for 3544 and whatever the server is, 44 different units?
So the total expense out of this fund's 144,000. The 40,000 that CARES paid for went to our fund balance. Off the top of my head, I don't have the fund balance. It's not a fund I look at the balance that often, but it is a significant amount of money. I think it's around 300,000 that we have sitting in this fund.
But we can use Uncle Sam's money here to 113,000 coming from the 413,000.
No, we can't. Those were, that was specific. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the technology grant, the police grant. So originally we had included the MDTs as part of that grant application. However, we're now stuck with what we put in the application, which was the radio repeaters for the school district, as well as the camera system for the skate park and for the actual PD facility.
So we were specific on what we asked for, not a general kind of
Correct.
deal.
Which I
Okay.
believe you have to be, and they require you to use it for what you ask them for unless you get a change
Okay.
approved through them. Any other questions about technology R&R fund?
I believe we're there.
Great. So then that is all I have for you as far as the budget and the individual funds. We are at the end of going through all of our lovely funds and all of the detail. So I will compile with the changes that have been made thus far and present you with a full package preliminary budget, which we can make changes all the way up until we approve in December if anything comes up. So are there any other questions about anything?
Just one.
Yes, sir.
I'd like the op center design to come back up as a bullet point if we could, please.
Tonight, right now.
Or if we have.
I mean, you have time right now.
Yeah, we do. We do
Go ahead.
have time. If you pull that back up. It's.
It's 500,000 out of the capital fund. I don't have anything to specifically pull up.
And the capital fund is, how much is in it currently?
That is a zero balance fund. So we transfer money in. So the money that was going to pay for it was coming from our REIT fund, so our real estate excise tax fund, which can only be used for the capital facility projects for any of our capital facility plans across the board.
And how much is in the REIT fund?
It's close to 7 million between the two.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'd just like to understand better why we need a design plan out there and do we really, is that really the cost of something like that? It seems. That seems like quite a price tag for what I understand is needed. So I'd just like more information on that.
Yeah, so right now, this year, we're working on the master plan update, which will determine what sort of structures, buildings, various things we need out there. The 500 for next year would be whatever it gets determined to be that phase 1 construction would be the architectural engineering plans to ultimately get to construction in 2025. So there's no set because it's not complete yet. It's a project that's being worked on right now that will determine what ultimately the site looks like out there. And then whatever's in that phase 1 would be will be designed next year.
Will that be in-house design?
It's architectural, so we don't have any architects in-house.
Right. Yeah. So. Outside of a few offices. Like I can go around town right now and we could find probably 10 different buildings that you would probably tell me, yeah, that'd work. Right. So do we need an architect to design shops? Do we need an architect to design buildings, or can we like I know when you buy a set of plans, you can get the full set to send to the city to say, these are all architectural designed and, you know, everything signed off, engineered, you know, a set of engineered plans, right? And say, here's your 10,000 square foot shop. This is all you need to do, right? Can we do something like that and not spend $500,000?
So a couple things, you can to a degree, and that's actually what we did on the garage building we have out there that now stores like the vac trucks and that sort of thing. So you still need the architect to do like the mechanical package and those sorts of things. The kit building that we bought was only the structural piece.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as part of that construction price, so all you're really doing is shifting the, you know, and I'm not going to say it's an equal trade. I actually think you get a little better deal for like a kit building. But that's shifted to the construction phase. So as part of that, they provide the structural drawings, but it's just the structural drawings. So the you know, mechanical, some of those sorts of things still comes from the architect, and that's all building code based. And I, as an engineer, can't do it. I don't understand any of that. It's not something that I'm licensed to practice in. But yes, the structural piece can come from the supplier. And we've done that on a couple buildings out there.
Cause I mean, I think when we're spending $500,000, that's a lot of money and I know this is simplifying it, right? Having some guy sit there with a pad of paper and go, well, this building would fit here and this building would fit here. And this would look really good. And if we put this facade on the front of it, it'd look nice. And if we, you know, I mean, to me, like this is, and I'm nothing against Public Works, but this is an operations center, right? Like you've got trucks that are dirty. You've got storing stuff. I mean, it's not, we don't need,
Agreed.
we don't need City Hall being rebuilt down at operations. And so that's like, to me, I think it's a lot of money I'd rather put $500,000 into the building and order the building and then, you know, hire the architect to go down and look at it and say, okay, this is where your AC unit goes. You
And
know,
I'll just reiterate, that was a number I put in as a placeholder because we're not far enough along in the master plan yet. So that was a number to me that was sort of a worst case, like, you know, we're building multiple buildings as part of phase one. I don't think that's what's actually going to happen, but it's just the way budget lines up with the way the master plan, they don't align, like, you know, and I won't know till probably very early next year what that looks like. So you know, I'm sort of in a rock and a hard place because I don't know what the exact number is. And I'm trying to sort of make my worst case guess to sort of, you know, have it.
can you bring it back to us then? Do we have to have it in the budget or could we have?
Now I could come as a
When we
budget
get-
amendment,
When we get closer and just do it as a budget event.
because I fully intend to bring the master plan and say, hey, this is what we're looking at for the phases. Agree or disagree.
I would be more comfortable with that.
How much open space is there left?
So the site's about 20 acres. There's probably 4 or 5 acres on the kind of south and east, that's wetlands. We're using probably kind of the northeast 5 acres. There's a good 10 acres in the back still left with the EQs out there. So that takes up acre-ish, the pond. So I think we've got like 6 or 7 when all is said and done. And that assumes you keep all the buildings. A lot of the buildings aren't functional on the site now. So
And then that brings up my final, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we had a yard sale. And there was a lot of stuff we have in various buildings out there that we put up for a yard sale. There were trucks, there were bicycles galore, there was all kinds of stuff that we're sitting on. I assume we're still sitting on that here 8 years later, unless we've just gone through wholesale and we don't, all the stuff that the police collect, whatever, missing jewelry here or there, that just gets sent somewhere else, I assume. Are
Yeah, I
you
mean-
sitting on all that stuff?
I know, at least from the public works stuff, a lot of that's, you know, we take into auction or surplus, that sort of thing. I can't speak for the other departments, but I
We've
know
done-
most of our stuff's gone.
We've done quite a bit. Mike's really good about bringing us old equipment and it's going off to auction or like mowers or whatnot. So we're getting rid of stuff as we're getting stuff to make sure that we're not doing.
But the
holding on to stuff.
bicycles and all this other stuff,
I don't know what.
is there a barn full of bicycles out there?
I think you're talking about the police.
Well, yeah, I understand that. You own the barn though.
Correct. I don't know how many bikes are in there. I don't know if Chief does.
I haven't seen in there in a while, you know, we periodically get rid of them either at evidence.com and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if we do with all the bicycles. I don't think there's a whole barn full anymore like there used to be, but I'm not sure.
It was a large yard sale. I do remember we held it there in the, whatever the building's called now, Flex Building,
Flex
whatever it's
Building, yeah.
called. And there was a lot of stuff that went out the door.
What about vehicles like I think we have a camper there, right? Or two?
We've gotten rid of some stuff, but I think there's 2 left.
There's 2 campers over there left, and we're actually working right now to try to get a contract for having those towed out and salvaged.
So is that all we're waiting for, is just towing them?
Yeah, we were kind of waiting, when we first started pulling them in there, is doing 2 or 3 at the same time because it's a lot more cost effective than doing one at a time, so, yeah. But those 2 have been there now for over a year, so we're gonna move forward with.
Maybe
those.
it's time. to-
It's time,
Yeah.
yeah. I think they're steaming.
Well, the time is 6:50. We'll re-adjourn at 7 o'clock. If you join us, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wonderful, please. Ms. Halili, let's see who's here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Cortez.
Present.
Councilmember DeRozier.
Here, online.
I see her.
Councilmember DeRozier is present via Zoom this evening. Mayor Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Bowman.
Yeah.
Councilmember McCoy.
Here.
Councilmember Dingman.
Here.
And the clerk is present. That concludes the roll.
Thank you, ma'am. Any changes to the agenda that need to be noted?
Move to approve as presented.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Council member reports.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yes, sir, please.
City manager and I had Monday attended a roundtable with Mitch, and I'm gonna Landrew. It's pretty interesting from a funds perspective on what's out there. But all in all, it was a big group, but we made our appearance and waved the flag. Additionally, then on that Tuesday, I also, as part of the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board, went on a tour of the salmon recovery project up near Mossy Rock, and also learned some interesting tidbits that I passed along to finance, Ms. Lowry, regarding the sewer injection and what was the other one, would parallel force or using CPU water, that board would write us letters to support grant funding for those. So was informative from that perspective. That's it.
Nope. Anyone else?
We want to see these people are sitting.
Elizabeth has to do that.
Do you see those folks on Zoom, Ms. Halili? Two people waiting to enter. Yes, ma'am. I will take a moment here to reappoint Mr. Rogers to the Left One Board, and here's the announcement. The term for the Left One Disability Board Council Liaison position number 3, currently held by Councilmember DeRozier, is set to expire on the 31st of December of this year. The Left One Disability Board is responsible for approving the medical claims made by the City of Battle Ground law enforcement officers and firefighter retirees who were hired prior to October 1 of 1977. This board meets on the first Tuesday of every quarter at 6 as needed. Meetings are currently held via Zoom. Mr. Rogers, if you will, are you still willing to serve on this for a 2-year term?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Zoom. God. Mr. Rogers, can you hear me? Raise your hand on, oh, I see you're trying. Okay, I see you say yes. May I have a motion then for the reappointment of Mr. Rogers to Left One?
I move that she be appointed.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. We'll start the presentations this evening with the proclamation of the Disability Employment Awareness Month. Is Ms. Wade here? Please, Ms. Wade. Oh, yes. We've met before. It's a pleasure to have you again. Whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act, and together with Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Rehab Act of 1973, established the right of adults and children with disabilities to participate fully in all aspects of American society. And whereas the City of Battle Ground supports the goals of equity, opportunity, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. And whereas the U.S. Department of Labor chose this year's theme of the National Disability Employment Awareness Month as Advancing Access and Equity. Whereas National Disability Employment Awareness Month reminds us of the valued contributions people with disabilities make in our nation's workplaces. And this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act of '73. This is a major milestone in our nation's ongoing quest to advance access and equity for all Americans. Now, therefore, I, Philip Johnson, do hereby reaffirm the principles of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, by proclaiming October 2023 as Disability Employment Awareness Month in Battleground, and urge all citizens to rededicate our community to fulfilling the letter and spirit of the laws, and ask policymakers and business leaders to redouble their efforts to benefit from increasing opportunities for meaningful employment of people with disabilities, promote employment in all sectors of our economy, expand employment opportunities for youth with disabilities, and renew our commitment to inclusive workplace. As always, it is a pleasure to have you. If you'll take a few moments and tell us what we're doing.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So my name's Kristen Wade, and I am an employee of Clark County Developmental Disabilities Program. And so thank you so much for acknowledging this with a proclamation and joining us in the celebration of October being the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Having no board member here with me tonight, I just wanted to mention that the Clark County Advisory Board advises to make recommendations to the Clark County Council relating to developmental disabilities issues and services. The board provides community leadership on improvement of efficiency and effectiveness of community developmental disabilities programs. And each year we host the Disability Employment Awareness Awards. This year, the event will be live and in person at Clark College Geyser Hall on October 11th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. The awards honor the role people with developmental disabilities have in assisting us to achieve a dynamic, productive workforce and recognize the leadership of the business community. The event celebrates October as National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and again, that will be at Clark College Geyser Hall. It will also be recorded and aired on CBTV for those who prefer to watch from home. We encourage you to join us. It is a public event. We do ask for registration, just so that we know how many people are going to be joining us there. And if you're interested in that, I believe we shared out a flyer in advance. So hopefully that all hit your email inboxes. And if not, you could also call us at 564-397-2130 or email at dd.program@clark.wa.gov.
Oh,
So
my.
I know, right? You just rattled that off into your brain, right? But we do really hope that you would join us there. It's a wonderful event. It's one of those fill your cup kind of opportunities to see individuals and businesses in our community honored for their contributions. So
And that was the 11th of October. What were the times again?
4:30 to 6:30.
And do you have a card, Ms. Urban, to hand Ms. Wade? To forward, or someone, yes. To forward the invite.
Sure.
So we can get that squared away.
Great. I'd be happy to. Thanks. So
Any
send it to
questions
you.
for Ms. Wade? As always, Ms. Wade, it's a pleasure to have you. And we do wish you the best. Hey, Ms. Urban, what's next?
Next up, we're going to start with a new employee introduction. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hersig.
Today I'm going to introduce Dan Holland, who's our new associate civil engineer. He's actually joining us on Zoom. So Dan, if you want to hop on. Dan was born in Bellevue, Washington. He moved to Indiana when he was 2, and then back to the Pacific Northwest when he was 8. He went through grade and high school in Westland, Oregon, and graduated PSU in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. During college, Dan interned with Construction Services Group at the Port of Portland. After graduating, he took a contract position at the port as an inspector for airport civil infrastructure projects. After about 6 months of inspection work, Dan took a job with OTAC, which is a private architectural and engineering firm with offices across the Pacific Northwest. In his 7.5-year tenure at OTAC, Dan worked his way up from an engineering and training to a civil PM role. He gained his professional engineering license in 2019. Dan and his wife Casey welcomed a baby girl and their first child, Ruby, in May of this year. She's been an amazing and patient little baby, and they couldn't be happier to have her. In his free time, Dan enjoys spending time with his family, hiking, reading, and playing tennis, basketball, and golf. Dan couldn't be happier to be at the City of Battleground. in his first 2 weeks with the city as he enjoyed the culture and getting to know his fellow city staff. And I'm happy to admit he's been working on Fifth Street as we had hoped. So we're excited to get that up and running.
Well, Mr. Holland, it's a pleasure to have you, sir. Please take a moment if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks,
Can't hear
Mark.
you.
Gosh darn it. Anything?
Try that, Mr.
Yeah,
Holland.
sound like something's-
Can you guys hear me now? No? Thanks, Mark.
There you are.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the introduction. Yeah, to all of you at the council meeting tonight, I'm just really excited for the opportunity to work at Battleground. I'm hoping that my expertise will suit some of the projects y'all have coming my way, and it seems like there's a lot going on, so I'm excited to be part of it. Did that come through?
Would you raise your right hand and repeat after me, sir? I state your name,
I, Braden King,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend the Constitution
obey, and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America.
and laws of the United States of America.
solemnly affirm
Hold on.
I will support, obey, and defend.
Second verse, same as the first.
And laws of the United States of America.
This isn't my fault. Okay, there you go. There you go. You're back on.
Let's see where we were, sir. Obey and defend the Constitution
Obey and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America
and laws of the United States of America
and of the state of Washington.
and of
Abide by the law enforcement code of ethics
I will abide by
and will diligently and impartially
and will diligently and impartially
perform all duties of police officer
and will perform all duties of police officer
for the city of Battle Ground,
for the city of Battle Ground,
county of Clark,
county of Clark,
state of Washington,
state of Washington,
as such duties are
And if some of the family members want to shoot a picture of these folks as well, please come on up and shoot your pictures as well. Hold on, here comes some other folks to shoot some pictures. Okay, Chief, who's next?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So it is my distinct pleasure to reintroduce to you our newest sergeant. We're promoting Ash Kinlaw to sergeant today. He has most recently been our SRO, as you'll recall. Some people call him disc golf Ash. Well, I do. Some people I do. He prior to working here, he worked for the first 5 years in Del Mar, as you recall, probably before. He that straddles the line of Delaware and Maryland, and he had dual certifications there. He came to us a few years ago now, and he is married to his wife Allison. They have their 16th anniversary coming up this month. They have 2 children, Macy and Levi. And Ash was born in North Carolina. He lived in Maryland most of his life, and he graduated from East Clayton High School in North Carolina. Sergeant Kinlaw has been a police officer for about 9 years now altogether. He is a drug recognition expert, an advanced collision investigator, and a field training officer. He recently completed the basic school resource officer academy, and he's a firearms and defensive tactics instructor for the department. Ash worked with the supervisors to complete all required training in order to work multiple shifts as an acting supervisor. And he enjoys both learning and teaching, and has worked on his own training and knowledge and skills, which he hopes to impart on others as he becomes our next sergeant. When not at work, he likes to play guitar and a few other instruments. He's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu and still actively trains. And as I said, an avid disc golfer. And for a fun fact, he considers himself a bit of a nerd. I wouldn't have said that, but okay. And we'll give him a chance to share with you in just a minute. I want to just acknowledge my thanks and appreciation for Sergeant Kinlaw. He's done amazing work for the police department. He's a great representative for us. I appreciate your work that you do in the community and what you've done with the schools, and I look forward to working with you as you make it become a sergeant. So, all right. Thanks.
Please.
Thank you all for having me. I'm thankful for the department for this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoy being a police officer, and I'm looking forward to serving the community and the department in the capacity of sergeant. Thank you very much.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Ashley Kinlaw,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend the Constitution
obey, and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America
and laws of the United States of America
and of the state of Washington.
and of the state of Washington.
I will abide by
I will abide by
the law enforcement code of ethics
the law enforcement code of ethics
and will diligently and impartially
and will diligently and impartially
perform all duties of police sergeant
perform all duties of police sergeant
for the city of Battle Ground,
for the city of Battle Ground,
county of Clark,
county of Clark,
state of Washington,
state of Washington,
as such duties are prescribed by law.
as such duties are prescribed by law.
Please, yes, please, ma'am. Please step right up. Not a worry at all. Did you get all the pictures you wanted? Okay, cool.
Okay, we do have one more. As I mentioned, this is a little unusual to have this many people that we're bringing aboard. And I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Jim Keller as our new lieutenant. Come on up. As you know, we've been trying to fill this position for a little while as well. We're moving forward to do that. We have a great candidate in Jim Keller. He comes to us from Woodland PD for at least for the last 18 years. And 6 years before that at Federal Way, Washington. Is a lot of experience that he brings with us here. He's been married to his wife 20 years. Sarah, she's here as well. They have a 17-year-old son, Logan, and his parents, Jim and Pat Kelly, they're here. Okay. Well, his parents are very proud of him. He grew up and lived in Federal Way until he moved to Woodland in 2005. He graduated from Pacific Lutheran University in 1995 with a Bachelor of Arts in Pre-Law. And he was promoted to patrol sergeant and admin sergeant for the past 6 years in Woodland, and received his first level supervision certification, attended professional standards training, internal affairs investigation training, and FDO administrator training, in addition to multiple other trainings throughout his long career. He loves to camp, spend time with his family, travel, make cutting boards, and most recently has been enjoyed taking his son out to shoot trout. Lieutenant Keller is excited about coming to work for City of Battleground. He looks forward to working in a great place here and working hard and getting to know everyone. Lieutenant Keller will be assigned as our administrative lieutenant, in charge of our professional standards and personnel and detectives and those kinds of things. So we're very excited to have him. We're looking forward to working with him and bringing him aboard to share with all of you. So Lieutenant Keller.
Please, sir, please.
I'm just grateful to be here, given the opportunity, and I look forward to working with a great group of people and with a great police department.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Jim Keller,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend the Constitution
obey, and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America
and laws of the United States of America
and of the state of Washington.
and of the state of Washington.
I will abide by
I will abide by
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
and will diligently and impartially
and will diligently and impartially
perform all duties of police lieutenant
perform all duties of police lieutenant
for the city of Battleground,
for the city of Battleground,
county of Clark,
county of Clark,
state of Washington,
state of Washington,
as such duties are prescribed by law.
as such duties are prescribed by law.
We're gonna take 5 minutes for general chit chat and whatever, and then we're gonna talk about water and sewer, right? And we'll go back.
35, we'll reconvene. Ms. Erdman, is there anything else? Thank you, ma'am. Citizens communications, we are open for communications. You are limited to 3 minutes to provide your comment. Council may not be able to respond to your comment and may refer you to a staff member to assist if you need. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council this evening on any issue you feel necessary? Seeing no one step up, we'll move on. Does any council member believe that any item needs to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? I do. That would be items E and F. I would ask that the council approve currently A, B, C, and D, and that E and F be moved to the first order of business just to get it out of the way after we finish this. May I have a motion, please?
So Mayor, I move to approve items A, B, C, and D on the consent agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. I will take just a moment here to talk, ask you about the carpet project and the paint project. Mark, how's that going to run? If it's approved.
So as we talked about, we broke the bids up into 2 separate contractors. With that, we got about, in combination, 80 grand in savings. Plus doing it kind of in a, I'll say, less busy time of year. So the plan is kind of during the holidays when, there's just less people in the office, that sort of thing, to get both of them in here, do the carpet and the painting. We'll have, staff will kind of move some of the stuff around, get stuff out of our offices, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, most of the work should be during the holidays. I do think some will spill over into January, but the bulk of it should get done while it's quieter from a public perspective.
And what time frame are you hoping for?
Like I said, most of the work done by the end of the year and
In weeks.
oh, in weeks. I know the carpet takes 6 weeks to actually get the material in. So that will take, what are we, early October. So that will be about mid-November to early December. I believe they have about 45 working days, but I'm not sure if they'll take that long.
And we picked a pattern.
Yes.
We haven't seen the pattern. Do we have it?
It's-
Not tonight, but
We have it down, it was
Yeah,
downstairs
it
in the
used to be
conference room.
downstairs, yeah.
If it's still down there, we can pull it out for you guys to look at.
maybe next meeting we can look and see what the pattern is and the color.
We're
Same
going-
color.
It's pretty much a standard gray all the way around so that we can mix match with different furnitures and so forth. So.
Okey doke. Any other questions about that? Seeing none, if I can have a motion then to approve items E and F.
And so move to approve items E and F.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Is Mr. Rocher still with us? I don't see her on the,
She's on my screen, yes.
okay, I don't see her on.
Can you hear me?
I can
Yeah,
hear you.
there
now.
she is.
Looky there. There you are.
I approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to the business. We'll head straight into the multifamily tax exemption. Miss Erdman.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Yeah, back in February of 23, we adopted the multifamily tax exemption program, which included just a small residential target area that was consistent of the Deacon Development Project. Since then, Mr. Fontenette has presented to council several times regarding the development of the Remy Heights and the Eaton Park projects, which between the 2 projects would be a total of 200 multifamily units. And he is requesting that council expand the residential target area under the MFTE to include those 2 projects, which would give them a property tax abatement for the 8-year period. Attached in your packet, Mr. Fontenette's made several presentations on the matter. All of those presentations were included in your packet, as well as a fee estimate that was put together by the city on what we would be collecting for impact fees for system development charges, and then any building and planning fees. And as well as a letter from the fire district, 2 letters from the fire district regarding some questions from the last presentation that was made. And then Mr. Fontenette also had a response to the fire district letter as well. So those were all included in your packet, and I will turn it back over to you guys for any questions that you may have of staff or Mr. Fondant.
So let's open the floor. Does anyone have a question or a comment as for this? I will say that in the last, we started in February, right, with MFTE?
Yeah.
So in roughly 8 months, the learning curve just seems to be steeper and steeper. And we are, as a council, just trying to hold on to understand what it all means. And it is confusing. There are 4 different answers to each question that comes the way. And so it really becomes pick a winner on what answer you believe is best suited. I do see Mr. Bowman. Yes, sir.
You done?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple things. The mayor brings up a good point. As we've went through this process and the process, not just with Mr. Fontenette's property, but with Deacon's property, we've had a lot of changes. We've had a lot of things that we thought and have changed. We've had number changes. I think this is the 3rd time seeing this one, and we've had different numbers every single time or different things every single time. For that reason, I don't think we should be approving anything that we don't have at least, I would say at least 90%, faith in the process and the surety that this is what it is. And so I took the opportunity this week to speak with a couple of our state legislators about this. And I don't know, I don't know where council is, but I think most people think the MFT program is a good program from a standpoint of, the providing affordable housing, maybe helping to promote development. I think it did that with Deacon. They were able to develop and bring in a commercial aspect that maybe we weren't going to get. I think this is a program that probably could do very well in a revitalization of a downtown area, that similar to what Vancouver did with theirs. But what it doesn't do for us, that it does for other jurisdictions, and this is where the state comes in, is a lot of our legislators did not know or understand the effect it has on the fire district. And by fire district, when we annexed into the fire district, we became Fire District 3. So we're no longer the city, but we are Fire District 3 when it comes to the fire district. So that directly impacts our fire district, where if we were in Vancouver, and the fire district was owned by us, or the fire was owned by us, we just make it up in raising 2% property tax. We make it up in sales tax. We make it up in other ways. And it's the only sole source of income for the fire district. So in talking with our legislators, they think there could be a possibility of some changes this next year that would exclude junior taxing agencies from those from the ability to be swept and be swept by us. And so I think we need to have a pause. I think we did do one. We set that district. I think that pause needs to be until we have more information, or we can get the state to look at changing some of these things that affect, some of us more than others. And for that, I think we need to hold off on this and continue down the road that we have already, and not do a new project.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dingman.
Yes, I concur with Councilman Bowman. Given the impact on the fire district, as much as I want to see affordable housing for our people, the impact is too great and the uncertainty is too great for me to be able to support it. That's all, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cortez, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I don't discount lightly any voices that are in this conversation, whether that be my peers up here or those in the audience from the fire department, as well as those in the community looking for affordable housing. I want to remind council and those in the audience that Mr. Fontanet, I've known him for quite some time. And one of the largest developments that has gone into the city in probably perhaps the past 20 to 30 years has been the Walmart development and everything surrounding it. And that has been one of the biggest injections, one of the biggest contributors towards different agencies, including the fire department. If this property remains undeveloped, we won't see the full potential economic development and full potential windfall to any agency, and that won't help anybody at all. Conversely, Mr. Fontanet, or the first tax exempt project we approved was to a organization and a development which we had very little relationship with. Mr. Fontanet has proven time and time again that he has shown a commitment to this community. He doesn't send his representatives to speak on his behalf. He comes on his own behalf, and he speaks to council on his own every single time. He has shouldered the burden of certain projects, whether it was paying the bonds of Scott and Way until that project got up and running. Again, in this project, he's going to be building out the infrastructure for the roads as well as the sewer infrastructure. Again, he doesn't send his representatives. He comes on his own. And I think that speaks volumes for who he is as an individual and the commitment he has to this community. So I urge council to support this project. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance to expand the MFTE residential target area as presented and collaborate with Mr. Fontanet on an MFTE agreement for the two projects as presented.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? I'll second it. And we'll move forward and we'll go ahead and move on Mr. Cortez's motion unless anyone has any other questions. Mr. Rogers, I can't see you. Do you have a question?
No.
A voice from out in the wilderness. Then Ms. Halili, if you'll please just call the roll. So just so that we understand, a yes vote is in favor of Mr. Cortez's motion. A no vote, of course, is not in favor. Have I got that right?
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am, please.
Councilmember Davis,
No.
Councilmember Cortez,
Yes.
Councilmember DeRozier,
Yes.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Bowman,
No.
Councilmember McCoy,
No.
Councilmember Dingman,
No.
And we move on. The next order of business is on the solid waste transfer. That's probably a better word than garbage, isn't it? Solid waste transfer, set of words. Solid waste transfer stations and solid waste management. We talked sometime 2 or 3 months ago with you folks, and it's a pleasure to have you. So Mark, do you have anything to say before they show up?
Yeah, I'd just like to introduce Joel Loescher and Doug Drennan. They're going to be talking about a couple things. Mostly about the transfer stations, but the first thing we wanted to talk about is the solid waste management plan. Right now, the county is updating that. Per state law, essentially the city either needs to create their own solid waste management plan. We can work jointly with the county to do a joint one, or essentially we can allow the county to do it for us. And then we do an interlocal that says that's what we're doing. We've always done that previously. All the other cities in the jurisdiction kind of use that same method. So that's what I would propose we continue to do. There's an example of the interlocal agreement that would be required. I'm not going to ask for approval today. I'll bring it back to the next meeting for it. But if there's any questions about that plan or that interlocal, this would be a good time to ask. Joelle, if you wanted to add anything about that.
But before you start, are you contractors or Clark County employees?
I'm a Clark County employee.
Okay, and sir,
I'm a contractor.
you're a contractor. Okay, thank you. Then let's roll.
All right, well, good evening, counselors. My name is Joelle Loescher. I'm the Solid Waste Operations Program Manager, and I'm project managing the Solid Waste Management Plan update. As Mark said, typically we just go into an interlocal every 5 years. We do a plan update. We are overdue, and we've been working on updating the plan. Obviously, we've had a pandemic and a lot of things going on. So this interlocal kicks off the planning process. So really, it's an opportunity to make sure that Battleground knows that we want to make sure you're engaged in planning and providing input into what you want to see in the plan and in the plan update. So I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that we're keeping our website up to date. We also have the draft plan and a lot of current documents on our website. So Mark will make that available to you. We did come here a few months ago and we did a version of this presentation, but because we're talking about the solid waste management plan and because that plan requires a 20-year capital improvement plan, revisiting this transfer station ownership discussion seemed like a good idea. So Doug is here from J.R. Miller and Associates. J.R. Miller and Associates did a regional system study for us. Took about 5 years to complete. It is published on our website and we have hard copies that I can make available and I can bring back if you'd like hard copies to read that study. So he's also here to answer questions in regards to that. So when we're talking about transfer station ownership, we really want to make sure that all of you have the information that you need to make decisions and to ask questions. When we brought this presentation to the Clark County Council, what the council really wanted to see was, all right, so you're recommending this ownership model. Well, now what? How are we going to do this? What is this going to look like? So I'm responsible for developing a scope of work for a deeper dive into what a public ownership model with a representative from all the cities looks like. And so I want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to ask questions and to provide input into what that scope of work will be before we release that RFP early next year. So with that, I will pass it to Doug.
Thanks, Joelle. Yeah, again, I'm Doug Drennan. I'm with the company J.R. Miller Associates. I've been the lead technical solid waste person on the regional solid waste services study. Thank you again for this opportunity to present this. I'll try to be brief enough because I know you've seen this, but I know you've also had a lot of stuff. So there's been a while. So there is some redundancy in that, but we've added some new information. Hopefully it helps spirit on some conversation and questions that we can discuss. Can you move? Okay, so the agenda here, we'll cover a little bit of the solid waste background of the service area, the history, talk about the findings of the service regional study that we did. And then incorporated into that report is evaluation of the options. That's really an objective look at all the options. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll discuss the specific options for governance that may be available and then answer questions. Next slide. So a little bit of background of the overview. First of all, I think some people think this might have to do with the collection services, but it doesn't. The ownership of the collection is really your jurisdiction. You're responsible for that. And it's not a question of who's going to provide that. City of Battleground will continue to be in charge of their collection services. The solid waste management plan is prepared that enjoins you through an interlocal agreement with a 20-year horizon of what the services will be, and that includes the capital improvement plans. The transfer station disposal and recycling has been was built in early 90s. It's privately operated, but the public oversees that through the county. Battleground, of course, is linked into the services there through the interlocal agreement. And through through your participation in the regional steering committee and the solid waste advisory commission, inputs from the community has been a part of the process. Next. So a little bit of history, the system was built in 1992. It was a reaction to closing all the local landfills and going to regional sites. They built the two transfer stations, the central transfer station that you might be aware of, and the West Van were all built privately. As part of that agreement, they recognized that sometime this is going to be paid off by the ratepayers and preserve the option to own it outright and then look at the options then. The contract was extended in 2006 when a third station was added in Washougal. And as part of that agreement, the city of Washougal still has a option to purchase that facility also for $1. The regional in 2019, we started the regional solid waste services study to look at the system, look at the condition of it, and look at the improvements. And that was completed last year and finally presented and adopted by the council in this year. So right now, there's still negotiations with Waste Connections on continuing the operations. Move forward. So the findings of the regional solid waste system, which was, like I said, fairly comprehensive, was that the primary structures, the transfer stations, were in fairly good conditions, but the facilities have had no capital improvements since they were built. Since 2010, the generation of waste has doubled. So these facilities were not designed to handle this kind of waste. Looking forward, 60% of the waste that's generated is generated in the North County and goes to the central transfer station. The growth, fastest growing county in the state is Clark County. That's at least for the last 20 years. And it's projected by OMB to be continuing to be the fastest growing. And this area is slated for that. Generating possibly over the next 20 years, another 100,000 tons. So we, as part of our plan, took a look at these projections and said, what are our options? I'm not going to go into these options right now, but the North Transfer Station, maybe you use it, maybe some of your constituents do, but it's riddled with backs ups on the roads, long wait times to get in. I mean, it just wasn't designed for that. So there's some options that we'll talk about later. I don't want to go through them now. We're going to discuss them in detail. Next slide. So the other part of the study, as we talked about the last time, was the capital improvements needed for this system over the next years is going to be between $30 and $50 million. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. And negotiations are going on with CRC on how that will be operated and how the money will be used for paying for these capital improvements. The good news is, based on the financial study, is those systems have been paid for. There's revenue being generated that can be attributed to those improvements. And depending on how negotiations come out, how much of that money is going to be available is part of those negotiations. But it is positive, is a positive picture. And so that's part of the equation of what going forward. Next slide. So let me give you just kind of a thumbnail sketch of what's involved here. This is on the left here. There's a picture of the central transfer station. There is some property on the back of the property where they're using for storage, and now that property is not part of the system. It is owned by CRC. It's an old landfill. Whether it can be developed on or not, that still needs to be decided. But while they're still studying the alternatives, there needs to be something remediated to take care of the problem with traffic. And so the slide on the right, or a picture on the right, is that blue section is a new service road, mainly to add queue space and to get the public off the road, off 503, while the options are being discovered. So that takes care of only a small problem, but it does make the operation safer. Going forward, there's three options. Next slide. There are really three options that are being considered. On the left is the possible expansion of that facility onto that property behind it. That is a lot of issues. This facility used to be surrounded by vacant land. Now there's apartments and houses around it. The access off 503, the state is not going to allow a traffic light there. They've rejected that. They've made some improvements to eliminate the left turn out. So it's not going to get any better that way. But it's possible to expand it. We did some plans to look at that option and the cost. But it has some challenges. The other two options are to leave the current facility and maybe build a second smaller transfer station, sort of to handle the self-haul in another location. And that's a viable option, but it would require siting a new facility. Third option is just, this is not a good location for the facility in the long run, and build a whole new facility. Those options are being studied. The county's moving forward with in fall, looking at the siting options. And so moving forward with evaluation. And this facility, of course, mostly affects Battleground. So I wanted to spend a little time on it, and you'll be hearing more about it. As far as the other two stations are concerned, the main facility is the West Vance facility that's located in the Port of Vancouver. All the waste comes to that facility, is then put into the barge. The barge facility is just down about a half a mile. But this is 21 acres, and right presently there is the material recovery facility there, the big equipment that handles all your recycling. That is slated to be removed. CRC, Waste Connections is planning to build a new MRF. If they do and vacate that, that's going to leave open about a 40,000 square foot building that can be repurposed for servicing, new programs that are implemented here and at the other cities. So it's a real opportunity to consolidate services and also give you opportunities to recycle and recover more materials. So we've done a master plan for that on the right, where they have some of the same problems. Traffic's backed on the right of way. So that's part of the capital improvement plan over the next 10 years. And finally, the third station is the Washougal station. It is entirely too small to handle that waste stream. Again, just like the other two facilities, the traffic backs up onto the right of way. And so we've developed a plan to expand that facility. So all this is in the capital improvement plan. These are still conceptual and there's work to be done, but this is what's entailed in those monies. What it will do for you as a community is will improve your services, provide long-term services for handling other waste streams in the most efficient way. Next slide. So as part of the phase 1 study, we did look at the ownership option. This was an objective look at these 4 options of different relationships of public ownership, private operations, or public ownerships. It was just an objective look at what are the benefits to each of these options to let you know that all of these models are in practice. Most of them are in the state of Washington, tend to be public ownership, either private or public ownership or private, but in reality, they all work. It's a matter of public local jurisdiction and what works for them. So in this study, we conducted that. As part of it, next slide. As part of it, we had some criteria to look at, and they're listed here. I'm not going to go into details, but we looked at the management of the money, control, experience, management experience. Next slide. And we looked at the risk, cost, contracting out the services, the advantages and disadvantages, and the regulatory options. And from these alternatives, we developed this report, which is available to you if you're interested. The list of the advantages and disadvantages, and did a full analysis. There's no predetermined outcome, just here's what you get with each of these. Next slide. From that, in meeting with the SWAC, the Solid Waste Commission, and the steering committee, these criteria came forward as issues that they felt should be guiding principles. They felt a need to consider a multi-jurisdictional organization, since so much of the waste is generated by cities as well as the county and the city. A multi-jurisdictional organization had some attraction. And then they listed these other alternatives, these other criteria They wanted it to be a separate agency, one that was an independent board, not one that was under authority of one jurisdiction. The governing board should not be an elected board like Clark Regional, should be an appointed of elected officials. It should have authority to be able to finance and raise rates. There's no taxing authority with it. It's all revenue generates an enterprise fund, just like any other public utility. And the staff would be an independent staff. So there were 4 governance opportunities under the region or revised code of Washington that are in the code cited now. The Interlocal Cooperation Act really isn't for a utility. It's for, like, if you wanted to work with the county on a stormwater project and needed agreement on how there's services there or transportation, there's authority to set up that interlocal action to implement and to control that project. The other 3 are multi-jurisdictional organizations that are used as like to manage public utilities. The Joint Municipal Utility Services, a model you should be familiar with. It's the model for the Discovery Clean Water Alliance. And it's the Metropolitan Municipal Corporation is a directly elected, just like the Clark Wastewater. The disposal district really is an agreement to local cities to supply the waste to the county to keep all the waste moving. An example of that is in Lewis County, just north of you. So the JMUS was the preferred by the committees that looked at because it met these parameters. It's an independent board. It's regulated or oversees the jurisdiction of the operations, and it's elected officials appointed by each jurisdiction. It's independent agency, and it will publicly own facilities, but it has an option to either contract out the operation or operate it themselves. So there's options there. And the agency has revenue bonding capacity, but it really is a separate fund. You still would, in your collection rates, you are paying for the system. There's a pass-through for paying for disposal in the transfer system. So that still would exist some form, but you would have a little more control being on the board of what those expenditures and rates would be. So these recommendations were made to continue to look at these options. The preference was a public ownership concept, multi-jurisdictional, but continue with independent contracting operations out. And the county council said, we want to have further evaluation of this option, what it means and what does it do. Next slide. So the next steps are to get input from you, and we have some, and I'm going to comment on that. We've met with the city of Camas. We're going to meet with other cities to get issues that need to be addressed, issues, your concerns, and that can be put into the scope of work for an independent agency or consultant to come in and evaluate those options and go through the pluses and minuses and give you those options. That study probably would happen early next year. Those findings would come back to you as a jurisdiction, and you would have a chance to report and recommend and give guidance to the council on those final recommendations. So that's where we're at. I did want to acknowledge that last time we met, you had some comments, and so we recorded these. And on here is a response. This is not meant to be a final response, but there was a statement. Why is this important? Why should we do this? And the only thing I can say is, look at this original agreement gives you the opportunity to possibly purchase $50 million of assets for $1. And you say, well, okay, that's good value. What do we get? Well, again, solid waste authority is bestowed on local jurisdiction. You are in charge of that. And so having full control of that, that's your judgment. The more control of it you have, in terms of if you have new services, you have the ability to enact actions to make sure facilities are there or make sure the cost is controlled. So more of that will be studied. Another issue you have, I'm sorry, I can't read it. It had to do with, I'm trying to speak from memory. I'm trying to read it.
Board representation.
More board representation. So I was comment by someone that said, look I'm concerned that the big city takes all the membership and the county does. And it's a valid comment. It's a valid concern. So certainly as part of the study, that would be evaluated. So, typically like it would be, I would say it would move more towards what your Discovery Alliance is, which each participating agency has a vote, but that's to be studied and clarified. And then there was a question about the collection costs. I think Mark answered that, but I wanted to mention it here. So we were also at City of Camas. And next slide. And they gave us these two comments. They were concerned with the revenue and making sure that the county or the public is in charge of how the money is spent. And whether it's a public or private, those capital funds that are being generated should be allocated and managed by the county or the public agency to see how they're spent. So that was their initial comments. So I turn it back to you to comment. I don't know if Mark or Joel has anything to add.
Well, we won't waste the opportunity to ask you the questions. Yes, Mr. Bowman.
It's not the only time to ask questions.
I appreciate the presentation. I think this is, this is the part of our job that people don't understand, right? We think that our job is, building parks and doing all the fun stuff and talking about sewer, water, waste. These are important things that people want to leave their house when they put it in a garbage bin. Or yeah. And so this is something that takes some time. I think my big concern once again is like we do we call it JAMUSA. They had an A on the end of it.
Agreement was.
Agreement. Okay.
Yeah.
So we do that with DCWA and I think it's worked out fairly well with DCWA. The challenge is I always go back to the county and the city of Vancouver and CTRAN. And a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, roughly now, they wanted to do a new makeup of the CTRAN board, the composition board. And it was this fight for power over if we don't have the ability to outvote, these jurisdictions and someone can tell us what to do. And that's my concern with this is when we went into the Discovery Clean Water Alliance with the city of Ridgefield, us and the district, we were all, well, the county was part of that, but the county was part of that because they were the operators of the plant. And so we all had something that we needed from that. And we needed to work together and we didn't have a lot of opposition as far as against each other. And that's my only concern with this. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great way to go. We've seen what it's done at DCWA, but what I don't want it to be is, another political grandstanding that we get with CTRAN and whether it be the city saying the county's not going to tell us what to do or the county saying we represent everybody. So, that's the challenge with that. And that's the battle that I think we're going to have as we go forward is can we get less ego in the room and more people that are willing to look at what's right for the county and what we need. And if we can do that, then I think it's a great way to go. But I do appreciate you guys continuing to have this discussion with us. It's important. I think all of us, because we all drive south at some point in time, have seen the lines out of there, and nothing makes me more mad to go in there now and realizing I can't turn left and I have to keep going south and figure out how to turn around. But you know, and it was, you know, 20 years ago when I moved to the city, that there was not a lot of stuff around that down there. And it has gotten a lot busier. And so this is a problem that we're gonna have to deal with.
Well, your comments are well taken. Those are very legitimate concerns and so it will be considered.
Thank you.
Let me just say about C-Tran, if the four smaller cities could ever get together, we could outdo the county and Vancouver just on the way they work, but neither here nor there. You mentioned a couple of things. Who is the CRC currently? Who's it?
It's Columbia
made up?
Columbia Resource Company. They're a subsidiary company of Waste Connections.
Okay,
Their authority is simply to operate the transfer stations.
and then the SWAC.
That's the Solid Waste Advisory Commission under the county. That's there's appointments and they have regular meetings. You can speak to what they're.
Well, does the city have someone on that, on the SWAC?
No, I'm on the committee, which is kind of underneath them. It's almost like it's an advisory committee to them.
So, you know, there's a lot of ways that Clark County is unique. And one of them is that our SWAC is not just it's not just members of cities, or it's not just representatives, which a lot of other counties in Washington have. Their SWAC is representatives from all the cities. Our SWAC, and this is longstanding, it's in our code. So you can take a peek at our website also for the composition of what our SWAC is. There is a representative from the smaller cities, but we just have one representative from City of Vancouver and then one representative for the other cities. So to answer to that, we created a regional system steering committee. That steering committee also has a lot of involvement in the planning process and was really kind of designed to supplement the fact that the cities aren't completely represented on SWAC. Though we always are trying to get more members on SWAC. So that you'll find in the interlocal agreement, the mention of the acronyms RSWIC, the Regional Solid Waste System Steering Committee, which is a mouthful, but Mark participates on that. So we really want to make sure that we're coming out to the cities, we're talking to each of the cities and saying, please join us in the planning process. Please talk about what you want to see in the plan. We want to make sure that all the cities have representation as we really look at this ownership model and do what's best for everybody in the county and for our regional solid waste system, because that benefits all of us. So it is a little unique to have essentially two SWACs, although King County does as well. They have SWAC and then they have MSWAC. So our SWIC just supplements that.
Who paid for the current study? The study he's referring to, who's paying for that?
Sure, that was part of our local solid waste financial assistance grant through the Department of Ecology.
And how much was it?
Off the top of our head, do we know?
Well, it was probably 500,000-600,000 over 4 years. But so we, in addition to study, we actually did concept plans, alternatives for all the stations with the participating with Waste Connections. So probably we must have done 30 or 40 options for these things.
Is it coming to an end?
It is in it. It's ending.
Yeah, the study was completed June 30th. It was part of a grant deliverable. So we came out in May, I think, to say that, hey, we're finished. This is almost finished. So now, you know, we're kind of revisiting this topic to say, yes, we completed it. I do want to also add that the county just also completed our first triennial inspection of the transfer stations. So this is sort of a standard industry practice where we're going in and looking at really doing a deep dive in the condition of the transfer stations, because as we're discussing ownership, we want to make sure that we know what we're getting ourselves into. And so we will also be providing the results of that, the findings from those inspections either later this year or early next year. It just depends on how long it takes to develop that report. But the inspections themselves have been completed. So we are in contract negotiations with Columbia Resource Company. This ownership option is part of our current contract and something that we're anticipating continuing in our negotiations with the new contract. But these inspections were really important for us to make sure that, hey, if we're starting a new contract and we're looking at all of this, what is the true state? So the study that J.R. Miller and Associates did for us was sort of an overview, some
hey, what are some options? What can we look at? And then the inspections that we just completed were really a deep dive with engineers and with really getting into what the condition of the
Yeah, just
sites
a little
look
more
like.
clarification. The inspections we did was in the original condition assessments was looking at structures, looking at the kind of key components, making sure that building is not gonna fall down or it hasn't been maintained or so this work that they're doing is going much deeper to take a look at the, heating systems and any of the equipment. We did not do that, that level of detail. So it's a more intense analysis that can be used into defining say a renewal replacement budget for, what needs to get fixed with.
Right. And so, I mean, a lot of this type of work is often done in these sort of phased approaches. You go in, you do an initial evaluation, and then you say, oh, we actually really need to look at this a lot deeper. So that's what we have been doing and what we anticipate really providing to both SWAC and to RSWIC as we're looking at making this decision on how we want to move forward with ownership. So sort of in tandem with all of those inspections and findings, we want to make sure that we're looking at, okay, well, what does this look like in terms of a setup? And what I'm hearing from a lot of the city councils is, all right, well, what are you asking from us? What sort of staffing commitment? What sort of time commitment? And so it's really the how of how will this work and what does this look like and what's the timeline in getting something like this in place? So those are the questions I'm hearing and I'm anticipating, answering with our next study.
One other point on that expenditure, we also wrote a good portion of the salaries plan for that. That was part of our scope too.
I'm always interested in seeing what we paid for. Do you know off the top of your head how many pages it was?
Whether it was done in two parts, the phase one study is probably
Just a guess. Not a big deal.
probably 80 pages with appendices,
Okay.
and that includes drawings.
And the second,
And the second one, about 50 pages.
okay. Will you pick up a card from Miss Urban and send us a link so that we can see that? What's the profit percentage currently that the CRC is making off of this? Do you know?
Well, I can only tell you what their quote operating margin is. That means that cost, that revenue that's above the cost to actually operate. And that would include their commitment to the general administration. But from the study, the net income is in the range of 30 out of the $107 a ton. $33 a ton is up and beyond the direct operating costs.
So about a 30%.
Yeah, now, some of that could be explained as to an entitled operating margin of say 10 to 12%. Because they have they're getting paid for everything they're investing. And so how much is an operating margin on that? That's fair. Typically, that may range from 10 to 15%, which would be their profit. And then everything above that is available for expending on capital improvements. And that's what the negotiations are.
Got you.
And so we did a financial pro forma of that as part of our study. We had an accountant that worked for us on this. And he projected out, and depending on how that contract, that will generate over 5 years, 10 or 40 to $50 million.
Okey doke. Let me think where I was. On the $30 to $50 million that's needed, I assume that's for upgrades.
Well, the reason for the difference in, if you do some of the improvements that we had, which would fix the roadway system, circulation, expand facilities, that would be like 30 million. The reason there's another 20 million, if you have to build a whole new station, it would probably cost more. So that's why it's the range until they evaluate those options.
And then Mr. Bowman mentioned C-Tran. C-Tran, of course, is on the sales tax. Gets a percentage of the sales tax. Would this be eligible for a percentage of the sales tax?
No, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't believe that's been brought
No,
up.
I
I don't
think-
think so, but I
think
don't want to.
under the law, this would be a strict enterprise fund, very much like your Discovery Alliance.
So it's a PUD.
It's a PU.
It-
yeah, yeah,
It's a more of a PUD model.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then you mentioned the third station, the new station. And I appreciate that, but what I believe will happen in that, looking at currently, the litigation on that will be outrageous. Because I can't imagine anyone saying, please, sir, can we have one here? And so all I see is the NIMBY folks, as probably they should, because as I watch down here on Central, I can't, there are apartments that overlook that. And, you know, location, obviously those people don't care. But I can't see a third ever being built in this county just because of the litigation factors. We're so crazy. And so for me, and I'll look at your study, but for me, I see the Central being upgraded and taken well into the next couple of decades. I wrote down quite a few other things. You've been to Camas. Have you been anywhere else?
Comment.
Oh, yes, sir.
So you're absolutely right, citing new facilities. You know, I've been in this business 40-something years, and transfer stations and facilities are difficult to cite. The one challenge they have there at CTR, unfortunately, and we looked at it, we found a way, we got a good way to expand that. But it would have to go on that other property. And unfortunately, that property would have to go through a zoning change and a whole public process, just as if you were citing it. So there's going to be outrage, I think, wherever you go. So the key I always look at is, what's the right thing? What is this the right place for the next 20 years? That's for you guys to look at. But I just wanted to tell you, there's complications in that need to be considered. But by in general, if we can expand an existing site, generally that's preferred approach.
And then one final, and then Mr. McCoy, you've been to Camas, you've been here. Have you been to the city of Vancouver yet? To present this to them?
They presented, we didn't go, but they did a work session on August 14th. That's
So all of the
available.
cities
So
have been visited?
this month they will be.
Okay, you haven't
Yes.
visited yet.
Almost all of them. I mean, we've been in discussion and Mark's been participating in our SWIC where everyone, but yes, this month, October is going to be busy for us.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering those. Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, thank you for coming out here. I know a lot of times we complain about lack of communication from the county. And this is a breath of fresh air. So thank you very much. I know you said you're going to talk about timing with the next study, but I just kind of conceptually want to get my head around this. Essentially, would the JMS and the public ownership kind of happen consecutively? I mean, happen at the same time, or are you looking to take public ownership as soon as you possibly can, obviously, because of the potential revenue that you could get, potentially do a private contract with them while you're figuring it out, and you can put that in the bank.
So we are currently in contract negotiations. So I don't want to speak to anything that's
When does that
And
contract expire?
that contract. We had a 5-year extension that we completed last year. So we still have 5 years to complete contract negotiations. But what we are looking at and what we are hoping for, we're hoping that contract is in place the beginning of 2024. And we're anticipating that this JMS model would start in 10 years. So really and we're anticipating that it's going to take a while to get everything in place. The timeline for developing it is going to take some time. And these discussions take a lot of work too. So we're building that in. We don't, although our current contract would allow for us to take ownership in 2027, December 2027. That's not something that we want to do. We want to make sure that the capital improvements go into the system. We want to make sure that we have the findings from our inspections and our studies, and we're really, really looking at what needs to go and what are we taking ownership of. And we also want to make sure that we're in this with the city. The county's not, and we've said this in our county council meetings, like we really want to make sure that we're doing this as a joint effort. So
Yeah,
To
and I,
direct this question, isn't there something in your discussions on management of that capital fund?
That will be managed by the county. So that was established, we created that fund at the end of last year. There was a staff report and we brought that to council. So
Yeah.
we did establish that fund. It's just a matter of we haven't finalized the contract in which those funds would go into it. So we don't have any funds flowing into that yet until this contract is in place.
yeah, I guess I don't understand. I mean, they're not going to put any capital improvements into it. So it seems like how much money you need to put in the structure is kind of moot because they're not going to put any money into it either. So, I mean.
Yeah, and I think it's been a confusing discussion for a lot of reasons. We can't change what's already happened. So we're looking forward at, hey, there's money in the system. If we can get this contract in place, then future money will go into the capital improvements. So future
Gotcha.
profits.
And this,
It's not solving what's already happened. What's already happened. So that's that's.
understood, but the
yeah.
soonest that could happen would be 27 is what I'm hearing.
That would be the first opportunity for us.
To get ownership and then start taking that. Okay,
right.
and then if we go down this road and the next council and I mean, I'm sure that well, Philip will probably be back and Shane will still be here, but I'm not, 10 years, I probably won't. Say we go down this road and a city, just one city, decides they don't like it. I mean, this is kind of either. I mean, you really don't have a choice at that point, do you? I mean, because essentially because of the economies of scale and what you're looking at, it's all or none.
Yeah, and I think this is a reason why we want to really develop that study of what does it mean to develop a Janus model and bring it to you all. Like, hey, what is everyone truly signing on for?
Gotcha.
And that's what our council wanted too. They said, this is great. This is initial look. You've made this recommendation. All right, now we need more. We need more information before we give a vote of approval or. So I think that I'm consistently hearing that as we're chatting with cities.
Awesome. That's all I had, Ms. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, we certainly don't want to buy a pig in a poke, to use an old statement. And so we do appreciate the work that you've done. If Ms. Urban will hand you a card, if you'll forward the links to whatever so that we can go on and peruse it. I look at it, I understand very little of it because it's probably written in language that's solid waste engineer. I about said trash engineer, but I'll call you a solid waste engineer language. But I do like to look at it and see just what is going on, what the thought is, I guess.
Yeah, there's an executive summary of that.
Oh, even better.
Google Translate.
Google Translation. Yeah, that's Mr. McCoy just said, I'll put it under Google Translation. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you both for coming. It's a pleasure to have you. Ms. Erdman, anything else?
Yes, we do have an administrative report from Police Chief Mike Fort, talk about school zone emphasis.
Yes, sir.
Hi there. We have a couple of things I'm incorporating into one admin report, and it's a plan for school zone enforcement, out-of-state license plate enforcement, and then also a snapshot of traffic activity on a couple different days. I'll explain that in just a minute. So the first thing is the school zone enforcement. I think as probably some of you are aware, we have increased already our school zone emphasis. Really, the goal is to reduce speed in the school zones, make it safer. That's the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And what we're doing now is random patrols with our SROs as they're able to. And they've already done at least 3 documented in the very recent past, 3 documented patrols. And out of those 3 times, there was a smattering of PM and AM times because they're obviously working during both of those times of the day. And out of those 3 days, they had 31 traffic stops with various warnings and tickets with that. That's what's happening right now. The immediate plan going forward, effective on October 15th. And that is that the SROs are committed to 2 mornings and 2 afternoons of enforcement. It'll be random mornings and afternoons, so it's not to be the same regular days. So morning and afternoon enforcement we have obviously the several school zones to attach to work. They'll track their activity, specifically the location, the enforcement type, and the violation. And that activity will be provided in the monthly report that we do for you all. And that'll start with a complete October report that comes out November 10th. But as I mentioned anecdotally, we have 3 documented stops our days that we've worked, and we're going to continue to do that in the immediate near future. In the the relatively near future after that, in January, our traffic officers, when they come aboard in their spots, they'll supplement the afternoon school zone enforcement as well. I would, not every day, but specific days that, so that they're not as predictable as otherwise, if we just noted that. So they'll be working the afternoons with the SROs. And that's all presuming, and same with the SROs, it's presuming there's not other priority things that pull them away from that. But the intent is that they're dedicate some time of the week, mornings and afternoons, to school zone enforcement. Starting in December, once a month. I'm intending for the entire detective unit that includes the detectives, SROs. To work in emphasis somewhere in the city. Some of that may be school zone, some of it may be red light, some of it may be other investigative things, but as a group together to work something. So as it pertains to school zones, particularly, I expect to see them at least once a month inundating some school area, morning or night or both. So that's a proactive plan that we expect that will reduce collisions in the school zones and also reduce the average speeds and make it safer for everyone there. So that's really the gist of the school zone enforcement. You've seen, I think Alicia put out today a snapshot, little really brief blurb on our city Facebook about what we've done so far with our school zone enforcement. So we're getting that message out publicly as well. So to make the public aware of it, and by having our police cars out there and making traffic stops, the public becomes aware of it. And hopefully, at least what we're hearing from the crossing guards anecdotally again is that it appears to them the speeds are slowing down already. Moving to out-of-state license plate, the object is to gain compliance with Washington's vehicle registration requirements. What's being done now, as what you know is being done now, is this once a year emphasis we've done with WSP. At least this last year we did, and that resulted with what it had 20 hours worth of work with 4 troopers and 1 battleground officer. Resulted in 123 vehicles observed and were later followed up, investigated by WSP. And that is about, I expect that to continue annually, at least with our partnership with WSP, because they're great partners with us and they want to be involved with the small community. So that'll continue. The immediate plan for us going forward again at beginning in April or October 15th again, is that a media campaign about that going out, similar to what we're doing with the school zones, so that people are fair warning when to register and when not. And then add that work to our parking emphasis. We do some parking emphasis, patrol emphasis now, and add that proactive work. During that, between now and the 15th timeframe, comes a little bit of training for our officers to know which vehicles to look for, what looks like a violation, and what we have. We already have a little postcards to put on the dash there on their windshield or whatever to put them on notice. So there's certain information that we'll log and send to WSP for follow-up. They've agreed to do that follow-up for us, and as they have done it with the emphasis they were involved in, and we'll continue that as well. Also, as I think you're aware of, that officers currently get parking complaints on their MDCs during the day as they're working. So in addition to emphasis, we will emphasize to our patrol staff to address those the same way with those, and to log the right information that we can send for follow-up. Those out-of-state vehicle complaints. So I started to mention a minute ago, we have parking emphasis that we do now to address some of the parking concerns while we're waiting for our parking enforcement person to come aboard. That's progressing nicely, by the way, and hopefully that person will be on board within, won't jinx it by saying when, but in fairly short order, hopefully. And again, directing the emphasis officers to also proactively look for those out-of-state license plates, and again, putting the placards on the vehicles, notating them, logging them, and getting that information for follow-up that we can then expect some compliance out of that, as we did in June. And that those actions will also be documented separately in the monthly parking emphasis. We'll siphon out those out-of-state plates as well. And then we'll post the results from WSP's follow-up quarterly. It takes them a little while to do their follow-up and feedback and putting out notifications and that. So we're intended to put those results out quarterly, And also it'll be in that monthly report, but it'll be quarterly. The future plan is our dedicated part-time parking enforcement person will take on all that work above, primarily all of that work. The detective unit sergeant will also coordinate with the other members of that unit. As I mentioned a minute ago, I expect that unit to do a little more global work. And that may also include canvassing the city. What I see with that and the direction will be, we're forming that unit right now, as you probably are aware. So that unit is coming on board October 15th. That's why this October 15th date keeps coming off my lips, because that unit is coming aboard again October 15th. And so that direction for that unit is to as far as for out-of-state plate enforcement, is to at least once a month do a canvas with their unit of 4 people or whatever they have there of the city, and quadrant out the city and make a loop. I mean, all WSP's work that they did, that's what they did in June. They just siphoned off the city like that. And 5 cops went around for 4 hours. And I think we can do the same thing with our detective unit people. Then again, that information all be logged. That detective sergeant will send that information to WSP, and all that stuff will be put on our monthly report as well. So we would expect the same outcome as generally as WSP, where as far as percentage wise and for compliance. And that's all I have about that. It's hard to kind of switching gears to random traffic activity day. It was hard to pick a day or pick a day. I could pick. So I asked, they picked like 6 random days, and one day there was one day there was 36, one day 27. And what I mean by that is traffic stops. I don't know why one day had 1, one day had 36, but it averages out about 16.5 traffic stops a day for 6 days. So some days are high and some days are low. And I suspect if I dig deep in the weeds, maybe there's an emphasis on one of the days. Maybe the other days had high call volume days. I don't know. But the point is that it averages out, and that's when I talk about traffic activity, our traffic activity averages up. I mean, every month it goes up and up and up, 51% in August. And I haven't seen September's numbers yet, but our overall traffic activity is up. But any random day it varies. It really does. That's all I have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chief, when you said we did the emphasis, how many tickets were wrote in a school zone?
I don't know if I know that. Are you asking about tickets versus warnings?
Yes.
I don't have that readily available.
Because, I mean, I think there's certain times we give warnings. There's certain times when I think the ticket needs to be issued. A construction zone, a ticket should be issued. A stop sign being ran, ticket should be issued. A red light being ran, ticket should be issued. Flying through a school zone, ticket should be issued. I don't. My issue is when we're using because anybody that goes through a school zone is, oh man, I didn't even know it was a school zone. The ticket should be issued for distracted driving. Because I mean, everybody knows this. It's different than, you're going down Ogsdorf and, it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone and you were doing 42 and they pull you over and say, why are you speeding? I just wasn't paying attention tonight. That's different than an actual safety zone. So I think we need to be more proactive in that aspect of because if you're getting a ticket in a school zone, that's completely different. Because then people are going to be saying, dude, I got a ticket in this freaking school zone, need to slow down. Right. And then just a warning. The other thing for the out-of-state plates, I know one of the not qualifications. One of the things is if you have kids going to school. So have we thought about having enforcement at the schools? Because it's starting to rain, you're going to have a line of cars pulling up there, and every one of those that has an Oregon plate.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Last Thursday, hanging out down there at Captain Strong with a lady. It was 8 o'clock. I hung out with her till 8:10. There were 7 vehicles with Oregon plates. Either one thing, the Battleground school system is incredible and people are driving by 6 different school zone districts to get here, or these people are stealing from us. And they are literally stealing from us. So it seems pretty simple to me to stand there with the school guard lady like I did for 10 minutes, watch them go in, drop their kids off. It's a horseshoe, as you know, and on the other side, so they don't get a ticket in front of their children. Here's your ticket. They're stealing from us. If they were stealing water from us, we would go after them. If they were stealing power from them, the power company would go after them. I don't know why it has been so, and I don't want to take your time. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
10 years ago, WSP came out here. The city said, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Bowman, others, we're on this. They weren't. As soon as they walked out the door, they forgot us. I don't know why our police can't write a ticket. Why do we need the WSP? Here's your ticket. The RCW is pretty specific. Here's your ticket. Tell it to the judge. And then we don't have to mess with it anymore. They're gone. They come to the court and the court does whatever the court does. In my neighborhood, I walk every morning 10 square blocks, roughly. There are 12 cars. Californians, North Carolina, Oregonians, all kinds of folks who have been there for months. They're stealing from us. We know what it is. It's 30 days. 30 days, you have to get a tag. I appreciate being friendly, but these aren't our citizens. If you're an Oregonian, if you have an Oregon plate, Sam is an Oregonian. So his plate's more than welcome. He lives in Clackamas County. But, you live in Multnomah. You're okay. Otherwise, they're not our residents. They may live here, but if you're a California plate and you've had California plates for 9 months, you're not a Washingtonian. I don't really care about you. You may live here. You may pay taxes here, but if you're not registering your vehicle per the law, I've asked Ms. Halili to, if you would, please, to put up. This is my current registration. I'm due in October. I'm paying $153 and I'll pay it as we all should. But why should my neighbors not? And why can't we have the police in a very simple fashion write the ticket and be done with it? They're done. Move on. I appreciate warnings just like him. I was standing there when that's my $53.25. And so why, as I'm standing there watching the police, and they did a wonderful job. My hat is off to you for the school zone enforcement. They pulled over a teacher. It's pretty hard to state, I didn't recognize the big flashing lights, the ladies in the yellow fluorescent and the orange, and I get my check just down the corner every day. It's pretty hard to get out of that. We have for too long let folks get by us. And it's dangerous. We spoke about that last meeting, and you've done a wonderful job in the 2 or 3 times. I have, my hat again is off to you, but we need a little more. We're being mocked on our Facebook site when we put up little signs that say no truck zones. People mock us. Why? You're not going to do anything to them. You're not going to stop them. And they're right. We have no teeth. We're all bark. And until we can get the city to stand up, then we will always be no bark. And I mean, always be bark and no teeth. And that brings me, again, I watch court every Thursday. If you watch the television says the nation's just in a lawless situation. I mean, they're just lawlessness all around us. For whatever reason, when you watch court with us, we don't seem to be in lawlessness. Good for us, I think. Or is there just nothing happening? he is through, the judge is through on Thursdays within the first 30 minutes of court on all the arraignments for 3 different cities on a week. That is hard for me to believe if I believe what's on the television. I understand it's the television and there are probably some, but we must be better people. I hope we are, or we're missing out on some law enforcement. And then I'll finish and give it back to you if you will. I talked with the Vancouver mayor yesterday. We had dinner on Sundays. They run a program down there on out-of-state plates where they have a very nice little letter. 2 people go out, they put a letter on your windshield, they mark where it says, the letter says, "Welcome to Vancouver. It's a pleasure to have you. If you're staying beyond 30 days, this is what you need." They mark the car, it's in the system. They come back 60 days later, car's still there. City of Vancouver sends them a ticket along with the WSP. Maybe we start that kind of thing to try to square that up. And then the last thing I have is disabled parking. I understand the sheriff has made us an offer to share his folks. He has we'll call him a disabled parking posse. And the city, for whatever reason, has not hooked up with him on this. I don't know why, because he's paying for it all. To us, it's just clearing up the disabled parking. They cruise through all the lots, write you in a very nice ticket. The sheriff takes care of it. You go tell it to the judge and whatever happens, happens. So I'd like for us by the next meeting to come up, to have spoken to the sheriff and ask him if the disabled parking posse is available to cruise Battleground. We save you the effort and they can clear up that too is a civilian outfit. So I understand a couple of folks in their own vehicles. Matter of fact, the mayor of Vancouver does it. And so I would assume that shouldn't be that difficult for us to sign an agreement with the sheriff on that. And one final thing, all of the school zone enforcement leads us to Mr. Ferrier and our next meeting. Mr. Ferrier stated for the camera regimen to work, you have to have the data. Is this the data that you think Mr. Ferrier would work towards meeting these camera requirements? Okay, but we have no data otherwise, so this should be the start of some data on we caught a guy going down Onsdorf in school zone time at 37 miles an hour, whatever it is. And so I would ask that when you do your final research on this camera regimen, that you work with the cops on getting what you think could be the proper data or asking that. And I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think, I thought in school zones, we didn't require the data only for red light cameras and speed cameras. Right, but school zone cameras, we could put those up no matter what. But only to be used during the school zone time. We couldn't use it as a speed camera without data outside of that, correct? Or was okay, yeah. No, Chief, I just think that I think enforcement in those areas, I saw it. I mean, you guys are like, I saw it the minute I pulled out of my neighborhood, because when I saw one police officer to the left with his lights on, looked to the right, saw a police officer with his lights on, and saw a police officer flip around in my neighborhood, I knew what we were doing. Right. And I just think that writing those tickets in those situations are different than, driving out 502 at 55 mile an hour. That's different to me, because those are already areas that we're telling you need to slow down. And the percentage, if you go through a school zone at 35 mile an hour on Onsdorf, that percentage, the difference between 20 and 35 is pretty great. That's almost 50% over the speed limit. So the other thing though, with the out-of-state plates, by doing it, could the SROs do that at the schools just pick days to, you know, be there in the morning at the school. And, you know, that is an education thing, because someone could say, I just moved here. You don't know that, right? But telling them, you know, you've got a kid in school here. Here's what the RCW states. You know, we're writing this down. We're documenting it. So you got 30 days to get them changed. And that's a good place to start, where to me, in the neighborhoods can be a little bit more difficult. There's a lot more, you know, trying to get to the right person. Where at the schools, they're gonna come back tomorrow and you've got all their information. So I think that might be a place that the SROs could be used. But I do think the traffic enforcements are good. I saw a thing that someone had posted about it, and there were no comments that I saw at the time that were against what we were doing. Everyone was like, good, it's about time, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a positive thing. You know, and then the rest of it, we'll see from there. I mean, coming here tonight, I watched 2 cars roll right through Parkway on Reds because they didn't want to wait. And you know, that's always going to be an issue, though. And I think it's always an issue if there's not a financial aspect to it. You know, warning's only so good. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none. Next meeting is the 16th of October. It says 5:30. What will we? Oh, I thought that was the council communication. Is there a council communication? Before we go there. Hearing none. So it says 5:30.
It was supposed to be for a budget session, but we pretty much went through everything today. So we will, unless we have a need for additional study session, we'll just have the regular meeting at 7.
So it looks like our regular meeting. I will say on November 6th, we will have a 5:30 meeting again at Battleground Health.
Yes.
For a walkthrough, if you haven't been there, and even if you have been there. I've asked the legislators to come, the 3 legislators, and 2 of them have said they will try their best, and the 3rd one is getting back to me. So otherwise, we'll see you on the 16th of November at 7 o'clock. Spend the day, wondering why nobody